Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Martin Durham. Martin Durham was born in 1969 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He was an ordinary child and lived in good conditions, all around his natural beauty. In addition, he loved fishing and hiking, capturing photos along the way. He usually took a tent and a hiking backpack to enjoy a few days in the fresh air, he often accompanied by an older cousin. At 17, Martin met his first love, Glenna Johnson, who was a year older. They live in the same area and attended the same school. Their romance was brief, leading to a quick breakup, but they got back together and broke up many times. They shared many interests and could not stay apart for long. Despite their similarities, but they ultimately decided to end the relationship and go their separate ways. For a long time, they neither saw nor communicated with each other. During this period, Martin met another woman, Christine Keller, and he quickly fell in love with her. The two of them get along very well and then they soon moved in together. After a short time of dating, he realized that she would be an ideal life partner, and they should build a stronger relationship. In the following years, Christine and Martin married and moved into a house given to them by their parents, located in a quiet residential area of the city. Over the next few years, they had 2 sons and a daughter. Christine focused on managing the home and caring for the children, while Martin worked to support the family. In addition to his main job repairing cars, he also worked at a restaurant in the city of Vlam. Despite this, the early years of their marriage were challenging, especially because their children were born close in age. So, they had many difficulties in taking care of their young children. They slept little and were often exhausted, leading to frequent arguments. However, they were determined to overcome these difficulties. Martin was a devoted father and made every effort to support his family. Many people saw him as a role model. In March 1995, Martin's family faced a tragedy when a truck ran a red light and collided with his car. The truck dragged his car along the road, crushing both Martin and the driver. Martin suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, a broken jaw, broken legs, and a traumatic brain injury that severely damaged a large part of his brain. Doctors tried their best to save him, but he was in a coma for months. Then, he underwent multiple surgeries and slowly began to recover. However, Martin's difficulties were not over. It took a long time for him to return to his normal life. He had to relearn basic movements, like sitting up and holding his head, before progressing to more complex ones. The accident left his face disfigured, and he lost some brain functions. Despite the difficulties, he tried to overcome them and return to a normal life with his family. He spent a long time moving around in a wheelchair before transitioning to crutches. Although he gradually overcame the physical effects of the accident, he remained psychologically affected. Martin could no longer work as an auto mechanic to support his family, and he encountered many physical limitations that turned his life upside down. The hardest thing for him was not being able to maintain the active lifestyle he had before. He loved camping, fishing, and traveling, but now he was bedridden and just hang around the house. Every movement caused him severe pain, which only the strongest painkillers could help manage. According to doctors, these effects would persist throughout his life. This challenging time affected not only Martin, who survived the accident, but also his family. His wife, Christine, previously managed only the children and household chores, but now she had to handle the family's finances. She was compelled to enroll the children in daycare and find a job to support them, in addition to caring for her sick husband. Fortunately, her close relatives pitched in to help. With their support, Christine was able to manage all the difficulties. However, Martin also became aggressive and hostile towards his wife. In addition, he also lost his memory. He cannot remember much about his past, including family events, and sometimes forgot his children's names. Longtime friends and acquaintances became strangers to him. He was isolated because he did not communicate well with people due to severe memory loss, difficulty concentrating, and confusion. This makes him cold and looked down upon. Martin often retreated into his own thoughts, which he kept to himself. Meanwhile, he was recovering from injuries and regularly attended physiotherapy, sometimes staying in the hospital for treatment. He switched doctors several times, but fortunately, his physical condition gradually improved. However, he was still tormented by the psychological aftermath of his trauma. At the same time, Martin constantly controls the family's spending and criticized his wife's financial management. This made their relationship more and more strained. This was a very difficult time for the young family. Martin went through a difficult process of dealing with trauma and psychological problems, but was unable to overcome them. Some issues made him angry, and he often lost his temper with his wife without justification. Christine did her best to accept the changes in her husband's behavior, but eventually, she felt she couldn't take it anymore. Years after the accident, Christine filed for divorce. Later, she admitted that she didn't want to do it, but she couldn't stand Martin any longer. The divorce was a major blow to Martin. He felt resentment and disappointment for a long time. Some time passed, he was able to regain his spirits. He received a large insurance payout for the accident, which he used to buy real estate and purchase another house. In addition, Martin was also paid a monthly sum by his insurance company as compensation for the accident during his recovery. Thanks to this, he was able to continue his life and take care of himself without financial hardship. After that, Martin moved to his new house with the parrot that Christine loved so much. She had left the bird with he to keep him company and prevent loneliness. The bird, a 15-year-old African gray parrot named Bat, was quite old. This new house is located in Sand Lake, not far from his previous house. He had big plans to recover as soon as possible, so he could return to normal life for the sake of his children. Martin quickly settled into his new place. He kept in regular contact with his children, and even his relationship with his ex-wife Christine improved. She noticed that he finally had an interest in life and enjoyed spending time in the backyard. He discovered his talent for design on his own, and this was soon recognized by others. Neighbors frequently sought his help for designing private gardens and lawn care. This job has helped him earn more income and gain confidence in dealing with life's difficulties and helping him improve his health. Doctors have observed a steady improvement in his condition and has a positive direction. Although Martin's health and mood have improved significantly, but Christine still hesitated to return to him. She is afraid that old problems may return. She kept her distance, maintained contact, and brought the children to visit. By chance, Martin reconnected with his first love, Glenna Johnson, who had also recently divorced. They rekindled old feelings and began a romantic relationship. Glenna eventually moved in with Martin. Glenna's children remained with her ex-husband, but she still visits them regularly. Martin's children also visited from time to time. Glenna and Martin enjoy activities such as fishing, hunting, and hiking. She assisted with his physical limitations during these times. However, it was challenging, so they often opted for walks in the area or visits to the casino, which they loved in their youth. These casino visits have become a monthly routine for them, where they tested their luck. They became well known in the local community, often invite friends and acquaintances over to play poker, backyard barbecues, and generally forming a harmonious partnership. It seems they have found each other again and are happy together. In the summer of 2005, Glenna and Martin decided to get married. Everything appeared fine, but their closest friends knew there were underlying issues in the seemingly perfect relationship. After the accident, Martin changed, he becoming more short-tempered and demanding. He tried to control Glenna and disliked when she did things without him or left him alone for errands. He tries to manage all their finances, which caused problems. She tried to manage family problems by himself, but he was suspicious that she was not entirely honest, spending excessively on unnecessary items. During this time, he continued to receive disability benefits, and his wife took on guardianship, but she had one weakness. Glenna was a gambler and spent a lot of money on it. She visited the casino much more often than her husband, without him knowing, and she losing a lot of money. Additionally, there were issues between Glenna and his ex-wife, Christine. Apparently, Martin frequently complained about Christine, accusing her of leaving him during a tough time after the accident, but he didn't talk about how he made Christine's life unbearable. Christine tolerated him for 2 years before leaving, but she continued to support him as much as she could. Christine kept in touch with Martin's and brought the children to visit he. However, he spoke negatively about Christine to his new wife, Glenna. Plus, Glenna also expressed that she absolutely does not like the children of Martin and Christine. This made Christine and her children feel uncomfortable, to the point where they didn't want to visit Martin when Glenna was there. They disliked hearing unpleasant things about their mother, Christine, and she supported their decision by not bringing them to their father. Martin became angry with his ex-wife and constantly quarreled with her. This led to tension with the children and Glenna. Overall, the relationships deteriorated, and everyone's behavior only worsened the situation. A clear testament to Glenna's deep love for Martin is the tattoo of his name on the back of her hand, which she got 18 years ago when they were dating. She never removed it, likely because she had strong emotions for him all these years. She has still loved him for the past 15 years and waited for the moment they would be together again. However, within the family, the relationship was far from romantic, with frequent disputes over money. Martin suspected Glenna was overspending and debt piled up. She often took money from him without his knowledge. Over time, she took complete control of the family's finances, further straining their relationship. Glenna began using the check from the insurance company that Martin received every month as an allowance. In addition, she also illegally traded in some strong drugs. At the time of the accident, Martin did not take these medications regularly, resulting in a large amount of medication being left unused. Glenna sold these medications secretly. However, his involvement in this activity remains unclear. Some believe he was complicit in the sale, help him earn extra income while he is recovering from a traffic accident and is struggling financially. But there are also those who oppose this theory, who believe that Glenna sold the remaining amount of medicine without telling him. Even though Glenna and Martin's relationship was having problems, they persisted in a toxic relationship for over 11 years. By 2015, they still acted friendly and were always seen together, but they no longer concealed their failing marriage. Occasionally, the discontent between them led to increasingly frequent scandals. One of Glenna's friends later claimed to have witnessed their breakup, during which Glenna threatened to kill Martin. Despite this, they mostly maintained the appearance of an ideal couple, walking hand in hand as they did at the start of their relationship in their youth. By May 2015, the issue of divorce had become serious. One morning that May, Christine, Martin's ex-wife, discovered that Martin was selling his house. She found an advertisement on an auction site and was very surprised. She immediately called Martin to ask why he suddenly wanted to sell a house he loved so much, where he devoted his love to creating his garden. However, he was unaware of this sale, so he asked his current wife, Glenna, about it. Glenna claimed it was a mistake and said she would resolve it, but the fact is she didn't solve it. Previously, their car had been repossessed due to debts, and Glenna had similarly assured Martin it was a mistake and she would fix it, but nothing changed. The auction for the house was scheduled for 3 weeks later, by the end of the month. Perhaps due to the debt accumulated during their marriage, and Glenna wanted to sell the house to pay off the debt, but she did not want to tell Martin about this. On May 13, 2015, one of Martin's neighbors visited him early in the morning to discuss some routine matters. The neighbor was surprised when no one responded to his knock, as Martin usually kept his door open at that time. Concerned, the neighbor entered the house and called out to Martin and Glenna, but no one replied. Venturing further inside, he discovered the reason for the silence. In their bedroom, he found Martin lying on the floor in a pool of blood, and next to it is Glenna, who was bleeding heavily from the head. Terrified that the perpetrator might still be around, the neighbor fled from the scene and immediately called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they realized that Martin was lifeless. Martin was lying on his side, wearing only his underwear, his body already cold, and the doctors confirmed that the 46-year-old had died several hours earlier. However, Glenna was still alive and even conscious. She tried to say something. She managed to utter a fragmented sentence that was not understood. Glenna was found lying next to Martin, fully clothed. However, she could not provide any useful information about the incident. She was rushed to the hospital for medical treatment. A bullet had grazed her skull without damaging the brain, so her injuries were not severe. She recovered quickly after surgery at the clinic. Detectives were able to question her soon after, but she was still undergoing treatment, and they had other cases to handle. The investigators tried to piece together the sequence of incident by examining the crime scene thoroughly. It did not appear to be a robbery, because valuables or personal items in the house are not lost. Even the money, left in a visible spot, was untouched. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Glenna and Martin might have known the attacker and let him in. During this time, police discovered that Martin was taking strong painkillers and Glenna involved in selling them. There was then an assumption that it was that trade that may have triggered the attack. The entire scheme of selling medicines was uncovered, and detectives believe there may have been a conflict with the buyer during the transfer process. However, by that time, forensic experts had already examined and analyzed the crime scene, including the bullets and weapons found in the house. The pistol was later tested and confirmed to be the murder weapon. In fact, this pistol has belonged to Martin for many years, but both of them were shot with it. First, the attacker must enter the house, know exactly where the weapon is and retrieve it. Then he finds the magazine, loads the gun, and then starts shooting. This plan seemed too complicated and therefore unlikely. Moreover, during a more thorough search of the bathroom, Martin's painkillers was found and had not been stolen, which ruled out the possibility of selling them and ruled out the motive for the crime being an attack by the buyer. The weapon used to kill Martin was found under the sofa in the living room. There is a lot of blood there, which did not match the location where the body was found. Apparently an attack also took place in the living room, a shooting, and then the shooting continued in the bedroom. Martin might have been shot in the living room, and then the body moved, but why was this done? It seemed this was done intentionally, perhaps to stage the crime and mislead the investigation. This assumption was confirmed when a spent cartridge case was found in the living room, indicating that the shooting occurred there. As the investigation progressed, more questions surfaced. Blood samples from different rooms were analyzed, revealing unexpected results. The analysis showed that all shots fired at Martin happened in the bedroom. His blood was not present in the living room, and there were no signs of his body being moved. The blood found in the living room belonged solely to Glenna, who was discovered in the bedroom. The bullet casing found in the living room corresponded to the shot that hit her head, supporting this theory. But how did she manage to reach the bedroom after this injury? Medical experts informed the police that this scenario was possible because Glenna's injury was less severe than initially thought. She could have reached the bedroom by herself, especially since she was conscious when found. Nonetheless, the situation appeared unusual. From then on, the police began to suspect that Glenna fired at her husband and then injured herself to divert suspicion. However, these theories still needed solid evidence. At this time, the police were unable to interview Glenna, as she was still in the hospital undergoing treatment and recovery. They took her mobile phone for investigation. Through this, detectives discovered that their family was experiencing a severe financial crisis. Just the day before Martin's death, she searched online for how to use the Uger 6 pistol, the same gun involved in Martin's death and her own head wound. Police found 2 farewell letters, in which Glenna apologized to her children for what she was about to do. She also said goodbye to everyone, indicating her plan to end her life. The Supreme Court identified Glenna as the perpetrator of the crime. Based on all the collected evidence, the investigation was reopened, but something compelled her to shoot her husband first. Martin was killed in the bedroom, and Glenna shot herself in the head in the living room. However, unlike Martin, she did not die instantly and managed to reach the marital bedroom. This can be clarified by talking to her, so the police waited until they could interview her. They continued gathering evidence in the meantime. Martin's family was already convinced that they were not attacked by a stranger. The shooter was his wife, Glenna. Christine Keller, the ex-wife of Martin, was shocked by the events. Although she never thought highly of Glenna, especially because of Glenna's aggressive behavior, but she did not expect this to happen. Then, Christine took her old Parrot home to the children. Meanwhile, detectives were finally able to speak with Glenna, who was feeling well. Doctors confirmed that she understood what was happening around her and ready to talk to the detectives. Despite the doctor's positive assessment, but she told the investigators that, in her view, she never wrote farewell letters and did not plan to end her life, let alone kill her husband. Police officers were concerned because Glenna completely denied being involved in the attack on her husband, yet she also claimed she couldn't remember what happened on that tragic day. This inconsistency seemed suspicious and hinted that she might be a suspect, but at that time, they had no solid evidence against her. Glenna was released from the hospital several months later. Meanwhile, the investigation had not uncovered any new evidence. Police were concerned that Glenna's denials and the trauma she had suffered might convince a jury that she was innocent. One day, Christine was awakened by the parrot's voice and went to see it. She was amazed by what it was saying. She decided to use her phone to record the monologue. The parrot kept repeating, "It says, beg Glenna, don't shoot him." This caused Christine's great shock and fear. For a while afterwards, she was even haunted by nightmares. She immediately informed the police and later showed them the video recording. Although the use of a parrot as a witness in court was unprecedented, from that moment on, all of the detectives' suspicions about Glenna's involvement in the case were confirmed. New details of the case have attracted widespread public and media attention. Meanwhile, the investigation continued. The incident was again in the news at the end of June 2016 when police arrested Glenna. They had been collecting evidence to piece together a full case that would clearly show the jury who the killer was and help the Martin family get justice. It was initially thought that the footage of the parrot accusing Glenna would not be used, as it might seem too provocative, and it was uncertain how the jury would react to it. The prosecutor argued that Glenna was in severe financial trouble and could not admit her gambling failures to her spouse. For a long time before the murder, she neglected to pay bills because all her money went to cover debts from her gambling addiction. Eventually, she decided to end her life, writing 2 letters, one to her husband and one to the children. This suggested that Glenna did not initially plan to harm her husband, but something went awry. The final straw was the failed sale of the family home, which was put up for auction without her husband's knowledge. When Martin found out about this from Christine, he likely confronted Glenna. A fierce argument may have ensued, leading her to kill him in a fit of rage before deciding to end her life. Glenna and her lawyer claimed that she had no memory of the shooting or the letter and insisted that she loved her husband too much, so she can't hurt him. They presented a list of medications she was taking to improve cognitive function as evidence of her mental condition. She also denied searching online for how to use a gun, stating that she only used her phone for games and calls. The trial lasted 10 days. The prosecution believed it had a strong case to persuade the jury. However, the jury seemed uncertain, due to the largely circumstantial evidence. Then, a video of the parrot's words was introduced as a crucial piece of evidence. Experts say the parrots form a close relationship with their owner, Martin, and they learn to imitate Martin's voice. Most experts agree that those words left a strong and deep impression on the parrot's memory, so it repeated them over and over again. In the end, this evidence was effective. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found 49-year-old Glenna guilty. In this case, the parrot played an important role as a witness, contributing to finding justice. The case of Lori Sars, the pregnant woman whose body was found in a city landfill, highlights how even a seemingly insignificant lie can lead to serious and tragic consequences. Behind every lie lies a motive, whether it's a desire to avoid punishment, gain advantage, or simply to maintain appearances. In some cases, lies are used to protect confidentiality or spare someone's feelings. In the case of Lori Sars, the story began with a small deception that snowballed into a devastating tragedy. Her mysterious disappearance in 2004 sent shockwaves through Salt Lake City. Her husband, Mark Hacking, reported her missing, sparking a massive search effort that captured national attention. However, the shocking truth behind Lori's disappearance would soon come to light. Mark Hacking's deceit stemmed from childhood trauma and a fear of not meeting others' expectations. As the details of his lies unraveled, the media frenzy intensified, with the case becoming the subject of numerous television talk shows and feature films. Lori Sars, also known by her married name Lori Hacking, was born in 1976. The tragic circumstances of her disappearance shed light on the destructive power of dishonesty and the devastating impact it can have on individuals and their loved ones. On December 31st, in the quaint city of Fullerton, nestled in California, a girl began her journey in the most unlikely of places, a children's orphanage, where she was placed immediately after birth. Her origins shrouded in mystery, with no trace of her birth parents. At the tender age of 2, fate smiled upon her as she was welcomed into the loving embrace of a religious couple, Thelma and Geraldo Suarez. Geraldo, hailing from the sun-kissed lands of São Paulo, Brazil, found himself teaching the intricacies of Portuguese and English at Sunny Hills High School. It was amidst the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro in the early 70s where he crossed paths with Thelma. Their shared mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cemented their bond, leading to a union in matrimony. Despite their devotion, biological children eluded them, but their hearts remained open to the blessings of adoption. Their journey brought them to Fullerton in the late 70s, where they embraced parenthood with open arms, welcoming Lori into their lives. In 1987, another addition, a son named Paul, completed their family. However, life's journey took an unexpected turn, leading the couple down separate paths, and the adopted children found solace under Thelma's care. Relocating to the tranquil town of Orem, Utah, mother and children forged ahead. Lori and Paul flourished, traversing the halls of local high schools and later venturing into the realms of higher education. Lori, in particular, blossomed into a compassionate, spirited young woman, her warmth and kindness touching the lives of all who crossed her path. Amidst the tapestry of her upbringing, Lori found love for the first time at the age of 19, a chapter in her life marked by the gentle whispers of romance and the promise of a future yet to unfold. Lori's path intertwined with that of her future husband, Mark Douglas Hacking. Born in April 1976 in the heart of North Carolina, Mark hailed from a lineage of esteemed medical professionals. As the youngest of 3 sons in the illustrious Hacking family, Mark inherited a legacy of excellence. His father, Douglas Hacking, stood as a prominent pediatrician, while his mother, Helena, contributed her expertise as a nurse. Mark's older brothers, Scotty and Lance, carved their own paths of success in the realm of science. Mark exuded an aura of determination and ambition, mirroring the aspirations of his esteemed kin. With dreams of pursuing a medical career akin to his family members, Mark radiated care and attentiveness, embodying the essence of a devoted family man. It was under the serendipitous veil of fate that Lori crossed paths with Mark, and from that moment, their bond remained unbroken. After 5 years of nurturing their romance, the couple took the leap into matrimony, forging a life together within the quaint confines of Salt Lake City, Utah. By then, Lori had already flourished in her career, ascending to the role of senior assistant manager in a prestigious company, while Mark, with honors adorning his academic journey, embarked on his medical odyssey at the University of Utah. Amidst their shared joy, the couple reveled in the anticipation of impending parenthood, with Lori's pregnancy casting a radiant glow upon their lives. Plans for a new chapter unfurled as they prepared to relocate to North Carolina, where Mark would pursue his medical residency, and Lori, her professional endeavors. Theirs was a tapestry of promise and potential, woven with dreams of a blissful future. Yet fate's cruel hand intervened on July 19, 2004, shattering their idyllic existence. Lori, 3 months pregnant, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of uncertainty and despair. Mark's frantic attempts to reach her on that fateful day were met with eerie silence, signaling the onset of a harrowing ordeal. As the days stretched into an agonizing abyss of unanswered questions, the mystery of Lori's disappearance veiled their once bright future in a shroud of darkness. Several hours elapsed before Mark made his way to the police station, his heart heavy with worry as he reported the inexplicable disappearance of his 27-year-old pregnant wife. According to Mark's account, Lori had ventured to a nearby park in the morning, a routine part of her pre-work exercise regimen, but failed to return home thereafter. Initially assuming she had proceeded directly to her workplace, Mark's concern deepened upon discovering Lori had left her phone behind. As he recounted the events to attentive police officers, Mark's voice trembled with apprehension. However, protocol dictated that a formal search for a missing adult would commence only after a 24-hour period had elapsed since the disappearance. Undeterred by bureaucratic timelines, Mark resolved to initiate his search, driven by the fear that Lori may have fallen ill and required assistance. Setting out to the park where Lori had intended to visit that day, Mark's hopes were dashed upon finding her car parked at the neighborhood's periphery, yet no sign of Lori in sight. Returning home, he embarked on a relentless quest, reaching out to friends, relatives, and colleagues in a desperate bid for information. Their collective response echoed his distress, with no one having seen or heard from Lori on that fateful day. Word of Lori's disappearance quickly spread, igniting a groundswell of community concern. Before law enforcement intervened, hundreds of individuals comprising relatives, friends, acquaintances, and concerned citizens rallied to join the search effort. Together, they combed the vicinity, engaging neighbors, local vendors, and passers-by in their quest for any semblance of information, while plastering the area with flyers adorned with Lori's visage, a poignant plea for her safe return. On July 20th, as the official report of Lori's disappearance emerged, the news swiftly reached the media, casting a pall of concern over Salt Lake City. In response, the relatives of the missing woman convened a press conference, their faces etched with worry, beseeching the community for assistance. Mark, Lori's husband, stood at the forefront, his anguish palpable as tears streamed down his cheeks, imploring anyone with information about his pregnant wife's whereabouts to come forward. By nightfall, a groundswell of support had materialized, with nearly 1,000 individuals joining the search effort. As police scrutinized Lori's abandoned car, a perplexing detail emerged. Despite Lori's petite stature, the driver's seat had been adjusted to accommodate someone much larger, a discrepancy too glaring to ignore. Further confounding investigators, a key revelation surfaced during a search of the hacking residence: the discovery of the car keys purportedly found in the park. The incongruity was glaring. How could the keys be within the home if Lori, as Mark had claimed, had departed in the car and never returned? This turn of events immediately raised suspicions about Mark, He claimed that the keys had been left in the ignition when he discovered the car, so he simply took them out and brought them home. While this explanation wasn't enough to detain him, it certainly warranted closer scrutiny from law enforcement. Soon, suspicions about his involvement in his wife's disappearance were substantiated in a most unexpected manner. Overwhelmed by grief, Mark's behavior took a bizarre turn. The day after Lori was reported missing, police received reports of Mark running naked through the city streets, his cries unintelligible. His distraught demeanor and erratic actions prompted a psychiatric evaluation, raising questions about his mental state. While many attributed his breakdown to the stress of his wife's disappearance, police speculated that it could have been a ploy to feign insanity and evade accountability. As Mark underwent psychiatric assessment, investigators obtained permission to conduct a thorough search of the couple's residence. What they discovered painted a chilling picture: traces of blood in the marital bedroom, alongside remnants of stained bedding. Curiously, a new mattress, purchased on the morning of July 19th, the day Lori vanished according to Mark's account, had replaced the old one. Moreover, concealed within the closet lay a sizable kitchen knife, its blade bearing what appeared to be dried blood. But the most damning evidence awaited investigators in the living room. An envelope addressed to Mark lay conspicuously on a table, containing a letter purportedly written by Lori herself. In the letter, Lori accused Mark of betraying her trust throughout their marriage, declaring their need to part ways. This revelation cast a grim shadow over the investigation, suggesting a far darker truth behind Lori's disappearance, one that hinted at betrayal and potential foul play. This revelation finally convinced law enforcement that Mark was directly implicated in his wife's disappearance. The only remaining task was to unravel the events of July 19th. A breakthrough in shedding light on the situation came from Mark's father, Douglas Hacking. According to Douglas, Mark had never graduated from the University of Utah, nor become a certified psychologist. He had been expelled 2 years prior, shortly after marrying Lori. Fearful of disappointing his beloved and his family, Mark continued to masquerade as a student, fabricating assignments and defending his diploma in a charade that snowballed out of control. Mark's confession to his father, made just a month before the tragedy, laid bare the extent of his deceit. He attributed his actions to familial pressure, feeling compelled to match the success of his relatives in the medical field. As the sole breadwinner in their family, Lori remained oblivious to the truth, with Douglas unknowingly enabling Mark by providing financial support. When the time came for Mark to defend his diploma, Douglas arranged an interview at a medical school in North Carolina, only to discover Mark's lack of credentials. Despite Douglas's insistence that Mark come clean to Lori, he persisted in his deception, claiming acceptance to the medical school on the premise of his fictitious psychology degree. Unbeknownst to Mark, Douglas took matters into his own hands and divulged the truth to Lori's sister. Shocked by the revelation, Lori grappled with the betrayal of 2 years' worth of lies from her husband, compounded by the fact that she was carrying his child. Wrestling with her shattered trust, Lori confided in her closest friend, seeking solace and guidance in the midst of overwhelming uncertainty. On July 25th, 6 days following Lori's disappearance, Mark, confined to a psychiatric hospital, was visited by his older brothers, where he divulged a chilling confession. He had taken the life of his pregnant wife, Lore, with a .22 caliber rifle. However, he withheld specific details initially, leaving investigators to piece together the grim events that transpired in the Hacking household. During a search of the local hospital's dumpster, authorities uncovered a spring mattress, meticulously cut into pieces, stained with blood and dark hair, an expertise later confirmed to belong to Lori. Mark hinted to his brothers that he had similarly dismembered Lori's body, bagged it, and disposed of it in a dumpster. Despite exhaustive efforts, no trace of her remains surfaced, prompting a massive search of the city's landfill by police and volunteers. Amidst mounting evidence of Mark's culpability, legal complexities loomed. Though law enforcement harbored no doubts regarding his involvement, the absence of a body posed challenges. Nevertheless, on August 2nd, Mark faced formal charges of first-degree murder and obstructing an investigation, leading to his transfer to a mental health facility within the jail. A grim discovery on August 9th marked a critical breakthrough. Human remains were unearthed at the landfill, confirmed through expert examination to be Laurie's. Subsequent investigations revealed a harrowing narrative. On July 18th, Laurie penned a note to Mark, expressing her intent to divorce him upon discovering his web of lies. Fabrications about his education, aspirations, and reliance on familial support. Unwilling to accept Laurie's decision, Mark resorted to an unthinkable act of violence. In the dead of night, as Laurie slept, he callously ended her life with a single gunshot to the head. What followed was a calculated effort to conceal his heinous crime, orchestrating a facade of her disappearance. As legal proceedings unfolded, initial plans for seeking the death penalty underscored the gravity of Mark's actions, casting a shadow of justice over a tragic saga of deceit and destruction. For Mark, however, lingering doubts persisted regarding his awareness at the time of the crime. Subsequently, the penalty was revised to life imprisonment. Only in April 2005, under mounting evidence and legal counsel's advisement, did the accused confess to the murder. Yet, he remained unable to articulate a motive for his actions. Tearfully, he lamented Laurie's significance in his life, expressing profound fear of losing her. On that fateful night, he claimed to have lost control, seized by a delirium that led him to fatally shoot his pregnant wife as she slept. Mark attributed his mental instability to familial pressures, which he perceived as relentless demands for academic excellence and unattainable standards. Following his university withdrawal, he bore the weight of shame for failing to meet these expectations, spiraling into a web of deceit from which he could not escape. Throughout court proceedings, Mark appeared in a bulletproof vest, facing incessant death threats. On June 6, 2005, the defendant was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, eligible for parole no sooner than 2035. Despite Mark and his legal team's appeals, all attempts to overturn the verdict were fruitless. Upon hearing the verdict, the murderer himself acknowledged the prison as his rightful abode, acknowledging the impossibility of fully atoning for his actions. The consequences of his unfathomable crime reverberated, leaving irreparable scars on the lives of all involved. Laurie's family made the poignant decision to erase the name Hacking from her headstone, laying her to rest under her maiden name, Suarez. For Thelma, this symbolic act served to sever ties with the man who had robbed her of her daughter and the promise of a future grandchild. A year into his incarceration, authorities discovered that Hacking was profiting from the sale of personal items, including autographs, palm prints, and even prison letterheads, on an online murder auction website. Upon being interviewed, Hacking voluntarily ceased this activity and expressed remorse for his actions. Remarkably, in the years following his imprisonment, Hacking maintained correspondence with his former mother-in-law, Thelma Suarez. Despite the deep anguish of her loss, Thelma, guided by her faith, extended forgiveness to her son-in-law and endeavored to find solace amidst the enduring pain. The tragic case of Laurie Suarez became the focal point of an episode in the television series Escape. It also sparked extensive discussions on various talk shows and documentary projects, including being featured as the inaugural episode of the crime television series Lies Worth Dying For. Furthermore, in 2014, the second season of My Dirty Little Secret dedicated an episode to the murder of Laurie Hacking. Additionally, the true crime podcast Sword and Scale delves into the intricate details of the case in its 29th episode. On the morning of May 25, 2013, Marshall University was celebrating the graduation of a new cadre of professionals. Mark and Joanna McDermott were supposed to be among the parents witnessing their children receive their diplomas. However, their day took an unexpected turn. This is the of Mark McDermott, a model family man who faced betrayal by someone he considered and raised as his own son for nearly 20 years. Mark McDermott was born in the early 1960s in Australia. Little is known about his upbringing and personal life. What is known is that Mark was the eldest of 5 siblings. His father, Bruce McDermott, as well as 2 younger sisters, Tracy and Nicole, with Nicole being the youngest, are his only known relatives. Close acquaintances have described Mark as not only a successful businessman, but also a kind and responsive individual. Nicole portrayed her older brother as a wonderful person who could never deliberately cause harm to anyone. Very little information is available about Mark's life, including his adult years. At some point, Mark traveled to the southern United States. The circumstances and reasons for this journey remain unknown. It was during this time in the US that he met Joanna Dunn, a single mother with a 4-year-old child. Even less information exists about Joanna's life. Most accounts come from her own narratives. However, the words she shared publicly were almost entirely dedicated to her son, who is also central to this story, Donald Wayne Dunn. Donald Wayne Dunn was born in the early 1990s in West Virginia, where he lived his entire life with his mother's family. His grandparents played a significant role in his upbringing, since they cared for him most of the time. The reason Joanna, a working single mother, entrusted much of Donald's upbringing to her parents was that she found it challenging to raise a child alone. Even when they managed to spend time together, Joanna often turned to video games and television to entertain Donald. On the rare days they were home together, it was challenging for her to give him all her attention. However, everything changed with Mark's entry into their lives. The couple quickly started a relationship and soon got married. Joanna adopted her husband's last name, and all three moved to West Virginia, becoming a very close-knit family from the beginning. Mark and Donald developed a close relationship as if they were truly related by blood. Some who knew them, including Mark's sisters and father, confidently stated that Mark treated the boy as his own son, and Donald regarded him as his only father. Their strong bond was evident. When Donald was still a minor, Mark and Joanna's relationship went through a difficult period that ended in a temporary separation. Despite Mark living alone for some time, Donald insisted on residing with him rather than his mother. During those months, the family faced another challenging period when Joanna was diagnosed with cancer. However, by supporting each other, they managed to get through these tough times. Mark always ensured that his stepson had a comfortable life without any deprivation. He made sure Donald never lacked anything he needed. Although Donald was a simple person who never asked for much, he seemed grateful for the peaceful and luxurious life his stepfather provided. In 2008, when Donald graduated from high school, Mark took on the financial responsibility for his higher education at Rio Noa Community College, where he studied for 2 years. Mark continued to pay for his education, even when, in 2010, Donald transferred to Marshall University. Despite living with his girlfriend, with whom he had been in a relationship since he was 15, and her family, he always enjoyed unconditional support from Mark and Joanna. It's noteworthy that their financial assistance wasn't limited to just tuition fees. They also covered expenses for clothing, car insurance, and paid for his living and food expenses. Donald only had to focus on his studies, a responsible and dedicated young man who strictly followed his daily routine and often cancelled or declined plans with loved ones due to study commitments or practical work requirements for upcoming exams. During his 5 years of university education, he maintained this lifestyle, aiming to graduate on time without falling behind in any semester. Saturday, May 25, 2013, was to be a significant day for him as he was scheduled to receive his diploma. However, what was meant to be as special for celebration turned into a deeply distressing moment that would forever alter his life. As the McCott family prepared for Donald's graduation ceremony, an emergency call was made to 911 from their home. "What is your name?" "Joanna McDermott. I shot my husband." "Okay, is he breathing?" "No." "Was it an accident?" "No, we were fighting." "You were fighting?" "Yes. It was supposed to be a happy day. It's his graduation." "Your child's graduation?" "Yes." "Is your child okay? Will the police be coming too?" "Yes." Authorities promptly headed to the McDermott residence. Sergeant Greg Keon of the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office was one of the first law enforcement officers to arrive at the scene. Upon arrival, he found Joanna in a state of severe shock. Moving further into the house, he saw Mark lying lifelessly on the couch in the living room. It appeared he had been reading a book at the time of his death. At first glance, Mark had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. When investigators moved the body, they discovered a 3rd wound in the back of his shoulder. The medical examiner at the scene confirmed that although the cause of death was indeed due to head wounds, death was likely not instantaneous. The amount of blood at the scene indicated that Mark's prolonged survival led to significant blood loss. According to initial reports on the incident, Donald had been preparing for his significant day, and noise from the shower drowned out the sound of gunshots. Consequently, he did not realize Joanna had shot his stepfather until he exited the bathroom and found Mark's body in the living room. "All right, how old is your husband?" "My husband is 54. "And you were just fighting?" "Yes." "All right, did you shoot him in the side?" "No, in the head." "In the head?" "Yes." "Okay, try not to touch anything." "My son is in the bathroom. I need to attempt to go downstairs so he can assist me." "How old is your son?" "He is 23. "Does he know what has happened?" "He doesn't know. He's downstairs for his graduation." The pistol was lying on the dining table next to a letter, presumably written by Joanna and addressed to Donald. In it, the distressed woman explained to her son that her marriage had become intolerable and that she could not stay in a relationship with someone she no longer loved. She also apologized for leaving his life without seeing him grow into a man. At that moment, Joanna and Donald were taken in separate cars to the Raleigh County Sheriff's Office, where an officer was to take their statements. Since Joanna called emergency services, the case appeared to be another instance of domestic violence with a tragic conclusion. In her conversation with the operator, Joanna claimed that she and Mark had argued, and in a fit of rage without realizing her actions, she shot him in the head with her pistol. This narrative surprised the officers who took her for questioning, because she then made a confession that completely overturned her initial story, and thus changed the entire course of the investigation. When the doors of the police car closed, Joanna revealed that it was not she who ended Mark's life, but her son Donald. However, this revelation was not all. The story turned out to be far more intricate than what investigators had assumed. Once in the interrogation room, Joanna recounted to Captain James Barr of Raleigh County Sheriff's Office the sequence of events that took place on May 25, 2013. She mentioned that her son's graduation was scheduled for earlier in the day. In the morning, she left home to run some errands and buy groceries. Upon returning home, and as she was about to get out of her car, Donald approached her and asked her to close her eyes, follow him into the house. He had a surprise for her. Trusting her son had prepared something special, she blindly followed him into the dining room, where he suggested she sit down. At that moment, Joanna heard a distinctive click. When she finally turned to look at Donald, she found herself face to face with the barrel of her own pistol in his hands. The gun did not fire. Joanna, completely frightened, managed to grab it and wrest it from her son's hands. She overcame her panic, which allowed her to think clearly and devise a plan of action to save herself from becoming Donald's second victim. Seeing Mark's lifeless body, she quickly told Donald that she was going to call emergency services and take the blame for the crime. Although the young man initially seemed to doubt her plan, he eventually agreed. During the interrogation, Joanna explained that she decided to call emergency services to protect herself from her own son. She understood that by confessing to a crime she did not commit, she would end up behind bars. Joanna added that she was sure that if she didn't do this, Donald would try to end her life. She also confessed that in the 23 years she had been his mother, she never thought he would point a gun at her head and pull the trigger. The gun used by Donald belonged to Joanna. She explained that it did not fire, probably because she had pulled the slide back far enough on the semi-automatic weapon, which prevents a normal shot. Captain Barr explained that Joanna's story seemed entirely logical to him because from the first moment he saw Donald, he had a feeling something was off. He noted that considering the severity of the situation, The 23-year-old young man appeared unusually calm and always maintained a neutral facial expression. For this reason, he ordered Donald be placed in a separate interrogation room away from his mother from the beginning of the interrogation. Donald denied any involvement in his stepfather's death. His facade, however, quickly crumbled when he was told of Joanna's statements. James Barr did not need to use any intimidation tactics to get the young man to confess. He didn't pressure him or demand detailed information to piece together the case. Donald voluntarily provided everything. The story that unfolded was almost unbelievable. It all began after Donald's first year of college. He wasn't doing well in his studies and decided to drop out due to poor grades. Initially, his classes were simple. Just showing up at the right room and time was enough for good grades. But as the semester progressed, it required more effort. According to Donald, he felt he didn't have the strength to continue his studies. Instead of telling the truth, he chose to lie to Mark and Joanna. His close relatives were not the only ones deceived. Even his girlfriend and her family were unaware of what was happening. Rachel Rush, his girlfriend's sister, said Donald maintained a routine that made it seem like he was attending classes. He left and returned home at regular times, spending most of his day in his room under the pretense of needing focus for assignments or tests. Donald even went as far as falsifying grade reports. This deception lasted for 4.5 years without anyone suspecting a thing. His family's faith in him remained unwavering as he pretended to be a student. Joanna and Mark had no idea that their son was misusing the money they provided to support him. Donald claimed he never meant to deceive his family for so long. But as days went by, speaking the truth just got harder and harder. The one thing that stopped him from being honest? The fear that Mark and Joanna would stop covering his expenses. Even though he acted like material things, a car and fancy clothes didn't matter much, the reality different. Losing his lifestyle was a big deal for him. Over several months, Donald thought he had the perfect plan to get away everything. From the start, he planned something drastic: to take his parents' lives. He wanted to avoid suspicion by leaving a note, something similar to what was found on the dining table with the pistol. Donald believed that when authorities read it, they'd think it was written by a distressed woman stuck in an unhappy marriage who saw no other way but to take her husband's life and then her own. On May 25th, Donald told Captain Barr that he secretly took Joanna's pistol and kept it all day while pretending to prepare for his graduation. Part of his plan included creating an alibi by going to the supermarket so surveillance cameras would record him there. However, things didn't go as planned. He didn't expect his mother's gun to jam, just as he tried to pull the trigger aimed at her head. The conclusions and plans Donald revealed later baffled everyone who heard them. James Barr shared that Donald even confessed he had practiced the emotions he'd display on his face when authorities arrived at the scene. He also considered how he would finance his life after losing the stable income provided by Mark, and decided to rely on the sympathy of his relatives for as long as. While they supported him, he planned to engage in sports to improve his physical condition. Ultimately, when left with no other options, he intended to enlist in the police or the army. Reflecting on the feasibility of his plan, Donald concluded it would be easier to kill his mother and stepfather than to confess that he had been deceiving them for almost 5 years. According to a legal document from the Supreme Court of West Virginia, published in April 2016, a month after his arrest in June 2013, Donald was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Even before the trial commenced, Donald and his legal team sought ways to delay proceedings. A few weeks before the scheduled start of hearings, while already in solitary confinement, Donald underwent surgery on his right hand. His lawyers used this surgery as a pretext to request a delay in starting the process, and arguing that during initial sessions, Donald would be under strong painkillers' influence. To decide on this matter, the court first required medical documents of the defendant. Eventually, the request was denied. The court observed that during preliminary hearings, Donald showed no signs of being significantly impaired by painkillers, and thus deemed him competent to participate in the trial, approving its continuation. The trial took place in August 2014, more than a year following Mark's tragic death. The jury trial was presided over by Judge John A. Hutchinson, with David White serving as Donald's attorney and Christine Keller representing Raleigh County Prosecutor's Office. Mark's two sisters, accompanied by one niece, traveled over 15,000 kilometers from Australia to witness the trial of someone they had considered family for nearly 20 years. Although detailed information from witness testimonies or evidence presented is not available, and there is a lack of photos and videos, it is known that the defense intended to state in their opening arguments that Donald was under illegal drugs influence at the time of the crime. There is no evidence that this was ever referenced before or confirmed through any toxicological tests. Just a few days after the initial, specifically on August 14, 2014, Donald Dunn was found guilty of the first degree of his stepfather, Mark McDermott. He was also convicted of attempting to murder his mother, Joanna McDermott, and using a firearm in the commission of these crimes. On September 5th of the same year, Judge John Hutchinson sentenced Donald to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for his stepfather's murder, and an additional 15 years for attempting to murder his mother. After the sentence was announced, Joanna read an emotional letter she had prepared for the court. In her statement, Donald's mother mentioned that something bad had happened at some point in her son's life, possibly after his grandparents' illness, or due to the pressure she applied for him to study at the university. She also suggested that frequent play of violent video games from a young age might have had an impact. Joanna expressed her disapproval of the public image created of her son and made clear her disagreement with the harsh sentence handed down. Judge Hutchinson responded that Joanna's disapproval did not influence his decision. He stated that he believed the sentence imposed was necessary to restore justice in this unjust situation. The judge sympathized with Donald's mother, but maintained that shielding her son from the consequences of his actions could not be justified under these serious circumstances. After the verdict, Mark's sister and father expressed their continuing disbelief at how Donald could take the life of a man who had raised him as his own son for 19 years. Though they acknowledged that Mark would never be brought back by this verdict, they were grateful for the judgment rendered by Judge Hutchinson. Annie Tahan, a 24-year-old young mother, vanished mysterious circumstances. According to her partner, she abruptly left him and their newborn daughter without any explanation for her departure. The search for Annie extended over 4 years, with ongoing efforts to locate her, but no immediate results. Annie Tahan, born on May 1, 1965, was raised by her mother. She had a love for, enjoyed dancing and fun activities, and cherished simple joys. Annie always dreamed of having a large family and saw motherhood as her primary goal in life. She embraced this role early, welcoming her first son Jimmy at the age of 18, and then her second son Sean just a year later. By the age of 20, she had also given birth to her third child, a daughter named Shane. Tragically, shortly after Shane's birth, the children's father decided not to participate in their upbringing and left the family. This abandonment left Annie facing the challenges of being a single parent to 3 young children while living in a rented apartment in Maine. In 1987, when Shane was just 6 months old and Annie was 22 years old, she met Michael Palin. He was a 32-year-old Navy petty officer serving on the aircraft carrier Bramby. Their paths crossed in Portland, Maine, where Michael's ship was docked. Michael quickly became taken with Annie during an encounter at the waterfront. Living in Charleston, South Carolina, Michael was highly respected in the Navy for his work as a computer systems operator. He actively participated in military operations and had been recognized with several awards. Annie found herself deeply attracted to Michael's naval career and soon fell in love with him. She confided to a friend that she believed she had found a man worthy of her love. After dating for several months, and developing their relationship further, Annie and Michael decided to live together as a family unit, along with her 2 sons and daughter. However, their shared life took an unfortunate turn when a fire broke out in their apartment. At that time, Annie wasn't home. Michael was alone with the children. While Michael managed to escape along with Jimmy and Sean, who could walk, Shane, being too young, sadly didn't make it out alive. After returning, Annie tried to go back into the burning apartment to rescue Shane. However, neighbors restrained her. The loss of Shane due to the fire left a significant impact on Annie. She shared that this tragic event created an irreplaceable void in her heart. As authorities started investigating the fire, experts faced difficulties in determining the exact cause of ignition. The circumstances were highly suspicious to investigators. Even with these suspicions, the investigation concluded without assigning responsibility to any individual. Following the devastating fire, Annie Tahan moved with her sons to her mother's residence in Portland. Meanwhile, Michael Palin immersed himself in work and chose to live in the barracks. A few months later, another alarming incident happened near Annie's mother's house. A shed in the backyard caught fire. Investigators quickly identified the fire's origin and discovered a lighter engraved with Bramby, the name of Michael Palin's ship. This evidence pointed toward Michael as a prime suspect. Despite this suggestive evidence, police couldn't conclusively prove his involvement because of insufficient proof. After this second fire incident, child welfare authorities in Maine determined that Annie Tahan's sons were in a potentially dangerous situation under her care. Consequently, they decided to remove Jamie and Sean from their mother's custody and place them under foster care administered by social services. This decision left Annie devastated as she fervently tried to regain custody of her children. Despite all her efforts, she couldn't do so, inflicting profound emotional distress and leaving her heartbroken over being separated from her sons. When Michael's ship returned to Charleston, South Carolina, he rented an apartment and reconnected with Annie despite their tumultuous past. Annie agreed to communicate with him and eventually moved in with him to Goose Creek, a suburb of Charleston, where they lived as a couple. However, Annie's stay was soon marred by a startling discovery. She found a photograph of Michael wearing a wedding ring, revealing his marital status. Confronted with the photograph, Michael admitted to Annie that he was married, but had been long divorced. He disclosed that his ex-wife, Dawn Breeze, and their 3 children resided in his mother's house in Savannah, Georgia. Despite Michael's reassurances of no ongoing relationship with Dawn, Annie was shaken by the revelation. She contemplated leaving him, but ultimately decided to stay, still seeing Michael as an ideal partner for starting a family. Their cohabitation, however, soon turned sour. Michael's behavior towards Annie grew increasingly hostile and demeaning. Annie, planning to return to her mother's house, discovered she was pregnant. This news led her to reconsider her plans to leave, filled with the joy of expecting another child. In October 1989, a month before her disappearance, Annie gave birth to her 4th daughter, Jade. Though Annie knew Jade could never replace her lost daughter, she felt Jade filled a significant void in her heart. Yet in the month following Jade's birth, Michael's treatment of Annie deteriorated further. He resorted to openly insulting and humiliating her. Annie confided in a friend about her fear of Michael's relentless pursuit if she attempted to flee. Michael's controlling behavior escalated. He confined Annie to their apartment while he was at work, disconnecting the phone and placing it in his briefcase. Annie was increasingly alarmed by Michael's actions. Just 2 days before her vanishing act, in a state of distress, Annie reached out to a close friend, Katie French, via phone call. In the call, Annie revealed to Katie that she had disclosed her intention to leave Michael. However, Michael had retorted that if she left, their daughter Jade would remain with him. Annie found herself in a desperate situation, overwhelmed with emotion. She urgently pleaded with Katie to come immediately and rescue both her and her daughter Jade. Unfortunately, Katie was preoccupied and could not come to her aid. Instead, she sent Annie money for a bus ticket, hoping it would enable her to escape and return to Portland. Unbeknownst to them, this heartfelt conversation would be their last exchange. 2 days later, on November 7th, 1989, Katie attempted to contact Annie but received no response. Several days passed before Michael Palin informed Katie that on November 6th, Annie had gathered her belongings and departed in an unknown direction. Expecting Annie to reach out from her new location, Katie waited anxiously. However, 2 weeks went by with no word. By Thanksgiving on November 24th, Annie had been unreachable for 20 days. Growing increasingly concerned, Katie contacted all of Annie's friends and acquaintances, but found that no one had any information about her whereabouts. She then tried to report 24-year-old Annie as missing to the police, but was informed that she could not file an official report since she was not a blood relative. Months passed without any sign of Annie. Eventually, Katie obtained the phone number of Michael Palin's mother. Upon contacting her, Katie was shocked to learn that Jade was in her care. This revelation confirmed Katie's worst fears. She knew Annie would never leave her daughter behind willingly. Despite the concerning developments, Michael Palin displayed a notable lack of concern regarding Annie's disappearance. He made no apparent efforts to engage with law enforcement or initiate a search for her whereabouts, and soon received a transfer to the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Months following Annie's disappearance, the search for her was finally launched after a report from her mother prompted official action. The initial focus of the investigation was her live-in partner, Michael Palin, who quickly emerged as the primary suspect. Michael detailed that on the morning of November 6th, he had woken to find Annie gone, having left their daughter in his care. He recounted that the previous night, Annie had expressed a desire to end their relationship. Michael did not attempt to find Annie, believing that their relationship had conclusively ended and further communication was unnecessary. He also claimed to be unaware of her being reported missing or of her lack of contact with family and friends. Upon inspecting the couple's rented apartment, police found no evidence, such as traces, clues, or suspicious items that could provide leads in the case. Annie Tarn's case seemed to have hit a dead end with no large-scale search initiated for the young woman. Her whereabouts, whether she was still alive, and the potential motives of any abductor remained mysteries. The only certain detail was that the last person reported to have seen her was her live-in partner, Michael. For an arduous span of 4 years, there was no news or sightings of Annie. Katie French, her close friend, remained the sole active seeker, tirelessly cooperating with the investigation. Katie invested approximately $16,000 in phone bills alone, employed a private detective, and was steadfast in her determination to continue the search. She reached out to various organizations that could potentially provide insight into Michael Palin's background. Katie personally held a strong belief that Michael was a dangerous individual and should not be trusted. She harbored a deep fear of him, aware that if Michael became aware of her involvement with the police, it could potentially put her in harm's way. In 1993, a significant development occurred in Annie Tarn's case, as it was transferred to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, marking a pivotal shift in the investigation. The NCIS agents initiated a comprehensive re-examination of the case, starting from scratch. They found Michael Palin at the naval base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. When police agents approached him to discuss Annie Tarn's disappearance, Michael said he would only talk if his was present. Later, he stopped cooperating altogether. He refused to give any more help or information. The Marine Police gathered all the details they could about missing Annie. They then reached out to South Carolina law enforcement. They asked them to check their records for any unidentified bodies, noting that Annie had given birth a month before she went missing. The South Carolina police shared a case about a deceased woman who also gave birth just a month before her death. They provided a sketch of this woman's face, which shocked the Marine police agents when they saw it. They were sure they'd found Annie. The scene revealed a violent murder. Her body was found beside a highway in Jasper County, South Carolina, about 100 miles from where she lived with Michael. The crime scene photos were horrifying, showing a rare level of violence. Annie's face was severely damaged, and her skull was broken into 124 pieces, requiring nearly 500 hours of careful work to reconstruct it. Annie's body had been put in a naval bag soaked in gasoline and set on fire. The burning bag was found at 6 a.m. on November 7, 1989, the same time Katie French noticed Annie stopped answering her calls. A match of dental records confirmed the woman's identity as Annie Tahan. With this discovery, Michael Palin became the prime suspect in her murder right away. Marine police agents set up a detailed investigation plan, which started with examining his financial activities closely. On the day Annie vanished, investigators found that Michael made a credit card purchase about 25 miles south of where her charred remains were found. Digging into his phone records, they discovered that on the night of November 6th, he had made 2 calls to his mother's house in Savannah. The first call was at 4:35 a.m. and the second one at 5:17 a.m. With this evidence, agents hypothesized that Michael may have killed Annie in their apartment, then moved her body to the roadside, where he set it on fire. To push forward with the investigation, NCIS agents aimed to find Michael Palin's ex-wife, Dawn Breeze. At the time of Annie's death, Dawn was still married to Michael and living at his mother's house in Savannah. After Annie disappeared, Dawn divorced Michael and started moving around a lot, living in different states as if she were avoiding something or someone. Eventually, agents tracked her down in Miami, Florida during the summer of 1995. That was almost 6 years after Annie had been murdered. At this point, Dawn had become involved with spiritual practices for income. When agents contacted her at work to discuss Annie's disappearance, her calm response was surprising. She even asked how long they'd talk because she wanted to know if she'd have time to eat. Her reaction wasn't what the agents expected. They thought she'd be more emotional when talking about Annie. Despite being calm during their interaction, inconsistencies began appearing during a lengthy 10-hour interrogation. Initially, Dawn's story matched Michael Palin's version. She said Michael told her that his mistress had left, and that he planned to raise their daughter by himself when she visited his apartment. However, inconsistencies emerged regarding when exactly she visited Michael's apartment. At one point during the questioning, Dawn became silent for a moment and looked down before expressing a wish to tell the truth. In a surprisingly emotionless manner, without any tears, she proceeded to share information she had kept hidden for 6 years. Dawn recounted that early one morning, Michael urgently summoned her to his Charleston apartment. Upon arrival, Dawn discovered Annie Tahan's lifeless body on the living room floor. Michael dawned to go to the bedroom to meet his daughter. At that time, Dawn and Michael were still legally married and shared 3 children. Michael confessed his affair with Annie to Dawn, explaining that it had led to the birth of a daughter. He pleaded with her to accept the child and assist him in raising her. According to Dawn, Michael, unwilling to engage in a custody battle with Annie, opted for murder as a more straightforward solution. On the night transitioning from November 5th to 6th, 1989, Michael and Annie went to bed. After a moment of intimacy, Annie fell asleep. It was then that Michael took a crowbar and began to strike her viciously. Tragically, their daughter Jade was lying next to Annie on the bed throughout this horrific act. Michael relentlessly hit Annie on the head, each blow more brutal than the last. Despite her strength, Annie eventually succumbed to her injuries right there in the bed. In a chilling turn of events, Michael reached out to his wife Dawn, requesting her urgent presence. He then placed Annie's body in a naval bag and transferred it to the trunk of his car, where he had also stored a canister of gasoline. He positioned both his wife and daughter in the car's back seat before embarking on a lengthy drive of approximately 100 miles. Upon finding a secluded spot by the roadside, Michael removed Annie's body from the trunk, drenched it in gasoline, and set it ablaze. After ensuring that the fire had taken hold, he hurriedly returned to the car and drove Dawn and Jade back to his mother's house in Savannah. Dawn Breeze's revelation provided a pivotal turn in the investigation, marking the first substantial evidence since the discovery of Annie's remains. The investigators then requested Dawn make a monitored phone call to her ex-husband Michael, discussing Annie Tahan's murder. She consented and contacted him accordingly. Michael indicated the need for a serious conversation as Annie's body had been located and identified. Michael's response, "No, they didn't do that," suddenly confirmed to the agents the veracity of Dawn's account. In the call, Dawn also informed Michael that blood had been detected in their former apartment, and the NCIS suspected them of involvement in the murder. She urged Michael to devise an explanation for the blood found in the apartment. Michael's reply, "Okay, we need to work together and come up with something," did not include any direct admissions, yet his demeanor suggested a clear understanding of the context of their discussion. He refrained from asking unnecessary questions or offering denials, implying his awareness of the situation. This interaction solidified the theory that Tahan had been murdered in Michael's apartment. Towards the end of their conversation, Michael advised Dawn to be cautious with her phone communications, insisting they would collaboratively manage the situation. NCIS agents took Dawn Breeze to the crime scene to unearth any remaining evidence. To protect her identity and ensure her safety as a cooperating witness, they disguised her before the visit. At the apartment, Dawn meticulously recounted and demonstrated the positioning of Annie's body and sequence of events. She pointed out an area near a wall and baseboard where there had been a significant accumulation of blood, affecting both carpet and concrete floor beneath it. Since Michael had vacated the apartment, landlords had replaced and cleaned carpets multiple times, explaining absence of visible traces. However, when police applied a special chemical to concrete floor, a large purple stain appeared indicative of protein presence, aligning with Dawn's account, where Annie's body had lain. Despite blood seeping into concrete, NCIS faced challenges in conclusively proving substance to be blood. Consequently, search for additional physical evidence continued. Dawn also mentioned a nightstand with television near bed, where Annie was killed. According to her, television had been splattered with blood during murder, and Michael mentioned its need for extensive cleaning due to stains. He later disposed of television, possibly selling rather than discarding it. Michael's pursuit of a functional appliance, considering his frugal nature, felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Despite this, the agents were resolute in their efforts to locate it. By this point, Michael Palin had become aware of the NCIS surveillance, especially after a phone call with his ex-wife, Dawn. This realization triggered paranoia, making him acutely conscious of NCIS's monitoring activities. The NCIS agents were concerned that Michael might attempt to flee, coerce witnesses, or potentially inflict harm on others. In a dramatic turn of events during one surveillance mission, Michael tried to evade the authorities. However, his attempt was unsuccessful, as the police swiftly caught him. Consequently, on October 11, 1995, Michael Palin was apprehended and taken into custody. While held in a military prison, under suspicion of murder, NCIS agents diligently worked to locate and interview all residents of the apartment complex, where the murder took place in November 1989. Their perseverance paid off 3 months later when they encountered a neighbor who disclosed he had purchased a television from Michael. Remarkably, the television was still operational and present in his home. The police promptly seized the television and dispatched it to the FBI laboratory for a thorough forensic analysis. To their significant breakthrough, the examination revealed 11 blood spots inside the speaker. These blood samples were identified as matching Annie Tahan's DNA, providing a critical piece of evidence in the ongoing murder investigation. At this stage of the case, Michael Palin's legal representatives announced his willingness to enter a guilty plea if the death penalty was set aside. Even though the prosecutor was unhappy with the way things turned out, military law required that such an agreement be made during the trial. Michael Palin admitted his guilt without showing much emotion. He wrecked the details of his crime with a detachment that was unsettling, almost like reading off a mundane list. His narrative lacked any signs of remorse or empathy. As a result, Michael Palin was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, with chance for parole after 30 years. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the Navy. Despite knowing about her husband's crime and staying silent for 6 years, Dawn Breeze avoided legal consequences due to her crucial confession to NCIS. This confession significantly helped advance the investigation. Annie's children, her sons and daughter, have been informed about their biological mother's tragic fate. They understand she did not abandon them. Jade, the daughter Annie had with Michael, has grown into a beautiful woman within the Palmer family. She has notably kept no relationship with her father. In a surprising development, Michael Palin was released from prison in 2013 after serving just 17 years due to good behavior. His exact location is currently unknown. It's advised that anyone who comes into contact with— Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery, the case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20th, 1986, in Upland, California. She is the eldest daughter of a business family and was raised in a strict, conservative family. Michelle grew up with a younger sister and had a close relationship with her parents. During her school years, Michelle led a relatively normal life. Michelle's friends describe her as polite and kind, with a straightforward personality who always says what she thinks. Whenever there are disagreements, she tries to resolve them. Michelle was diligent from a young age, consistently completing her tasks and responsibilities. During her high school years, she was in a long-term relationship with a boyfriend. The couple were together for many years and finally decided to get married in 2008. However, she soon discovered that marriage did not bring her the happiness she had hoped for. After 4 years, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate, and they eventually decided to divorce. In 2013, Michelle's life took a turn for the better when she met Ian Diaz, who was 9 years her. For Michelle, the relationship felt like destiny. Ian was a U.S. Marshal, and Michelle worked in marketing. Initially seemed well suited to each other. The two met through an online dating site, and after a whirlwind romance, they decided to move in together by the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they started making wedding plans. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect. However, Ian's true nature slowly began to emerge. At first, Michelle didn't notice the changes in Ian's behavior and attributed his actions to caring personality. As time went on, Ian's personality changed for the worse. He became more destructive to himself and emotionally hurtful to Michelle, causing her to be shocked, devastated, and extremely confused. Michelle came from a conservative family, and Ian would sometimes ask her to wear revealing clothes that made her feel uncomfortable. Despite her reservations, Michelle went along with her husband's requests, thinking he was just trying to spice up their relationship. However, Ian noticed that she gave in easily and began making even more daring requests. Eventually, Ian asked Michelle to get her belly button pierced, a request she was initially hesitant about, but ultimately agreed to. However, Ian increasingly pushed the limits. His requests began to become more and more strange. He asked Michelle to quit her marketing job and work at Disneyland, a place he loved and had previously worked at as a deputy U.S. Marshal. Perhaps Ian wanted to keep an eye on his wife, and working somewhere where he still had a relationship made sense to him. Ian justified his suggestion by saying he wanted Michelle to be safer, but in reality, he was seeking greater control over her life. Initially, Michelle found the request peculiar, but driven by her love for her husband and her desire to please she agreed. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the arrangement. She found herself becoming a different person, one that she no longer recognized. She then confided in her husband. But instead of listening to her, he became angry and violent. Afterward, Michelle and Ian decided to purchase a condominium together, hoping that owning a home would strengthen their bond. This decision was made about 2 years after they first met. The couple began their search for a condo in 2015 and eventually found one they liked in downtown Anaheim, although it was slightly more expensive than they had budgeted for, at $470,000. At the time of the purchase, Michelle had no idea that Ian didn't plan to contribute to the mortgage payments. When the first payment was due, Ian claimed he was experiencing financial difficulties, but he assured Michelle that he would pay the next month's installment. She proceeded with the $144,000 down payment. She handled the paperwork and finalized the purchase, thinking everything was in order. However, in retrospect, it was clear that their relationship was already deteriorating. The situation worsened after they bought the condo. Although the deed had both of their names on it, it became evident that Ian wanted the condo for himself, while Michelle was the only one shouldering the mortgage payments. One summer evening in 2015, Michelle and Ian got into a violent altercation in the car. Ian physically attacked Michelle, causing minor injuries. In the aftermath, Michelle composed a distressing email to her sister detailing the events, but unfortunately never sent it. As the summer drew to a close, nearly 2 months after purchasing their condo, Michelle decided to leave Ian and move in with her parents. Despite no longer living in the condo, Michelle was still responsible for paying the mortgage. This decision would later become a contentious issue in their relationship. In fact, Ian continued to skip the mortgage payments, infuriating Michelle. Around this time, Michelle had stepped down from her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland, a position she disliked. Furthermore, her new job paid significantly less than her previous one. In an attempt to address the mortgage issue amicably, Michelle reached out to Ian via email, phone calls, and texts. However, he deliberately ignored her messages, which escalated the situation. The tension between them reached a boiling point, prompting Michelle to confront Ian in person. Ian's answer was shocking. He never planned to pay the mortgage, which made Michelle furious. Michelle found herself in a difficult situation and decided to take action. She emailed Ian, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences if he continued. However, this email only made Ian angrier, and he responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle. The police did not fully support Ian's request, as they determined he shared some blame in the matter. When Michelle discovered Ian's request to obtain a restraining order, she countered by pointing out his failure to pay the mortgage on their jointly owned condominium. To resolve the issue, they agreed to hire property lawyers and eventually came to a settlement. The court ruling ultimately favored Michelle, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance. If Ian failed to comply, he would face an additional penalty. Although the ruling was unfavorable for Ian, he had no choice but to abide by the court's decision. This situation dragged on for a year, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had officially separated. This marked a new beginning for Michelle, freeing her from a toxic relationship. In contrast, Ian remained bitter about the outcome, continuing to live in the condo and pay the mortgage. Ian's life had become increasingly complicated due to the condo situation, so he decided to start using dating apps again to try to move on. This was how he met Angela Connell, a woman he thought was perfect for him. Angela was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona. She attended a Catholic high school and later graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016. And they immediately have feelings for each other. Their relationship progressed quickly. Ian proposed within a month, and soon Angela moved into his condo. It seemed as if they were meant to be together. By May 2016, Angela announced she was expecting twins, which made Ian incredibly happy. However, their happiness was short-lived when Angela received a threatening anonymous email saying she was not the right person for Ian. Angela was taken aback by the message and initially suspected it might be from her ex-boyfriend, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before marrying Ian. However, something didn't add up. She had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so he doesn't know about her new relationship with Ian. It wasn't until Ian brought up the topic of the condo, which was purchased by his ex, Michelle, that Angela realized Michelle might be the one sending the messages. As time passed, Angela received more emails from different accounts. The emails all contained similar information but were worded differently. Intrigued, Angela responded to one of the messages, asking the sender to reveal their identity. To her surprise, the sender claimed to be Michelle Hadley. Angela demanded that Michelle stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The tone of the subsequent emails escalated, leaving Angela feeling threatened and fearful for her life. Afterward, she decided not to take any chances and sought a restraining order against Michelle. The incident took place on June 1, 2016. Angela stated to the police that an email from Michelle had left her feeling fearful and anxious. She expressed concern about leaving her home due to the threatening content of the emails, and she feared being attacked or killed if did so. In response to the severity of the situation, the court granted a restraining order against Michelle. A short time later, in June 2016, Michelle seemed to have moved past the troubles of her previous relationship. One evening, after meeting a friend, she returned home to find a team of police officers waiting for her in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated peacefully with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding a restraining charge. During the interrogation, Michelle denied knowing Angela or sending the threatening emails mentioned by the officers. She claimed she was being framed, citing 2 alerts she received a week earlier. The first was from Google, stating her email account had been shut down. The second was from Microsoft, stating her primary email was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email addresses. Michelle reported this suspicious activity to the Anaheim Police Department, suspecting her ex-husband of impersonating her. However, her concerns were dismissed by the police, who believed Michelle was lying. As a result, a restraining order was issued against Michelle, but she was unaware that this was just the start of a more complex situation. Things took a dark turn after Michelle was served with a restraining order. However, things became more intense. Angela soon receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she hadn't posted herself. The disturbing ads described a sexual coercion fantasy and included intimate details about Angela's life. The emails contained her phone number, condo address, and even the breed of her dog. It was clear that someone had created an account in her name, but what was particularly unsettling was how they had access to such precise information. Ian and Michelle were the only ones who knew Angela's condo address. She suspected Michelle, but thought that was unlikely. Fear had taken over her so much that she didn't even want to leave her house. The thought of someone knowing her address and watching her all the time made her extremely uneasy. Not knowing who was behind it made her feel even more scared. On June 24, 2016, just days after posting the Craigslist ad, Angela was attacked, and her life was put in danger. Bruises covered her neck, her clothes were torn, and she had a severe head injury from being slammed into a wall. Despite her condition, Angela quickly called 911. When the police arrived, they questioned her about the assault, and Angela revealed that Michelle was her attacker. This time, the police decided to take stronger action against Michelle. They believed that a restraining order would not be enough to protect Angela, and they made the decision to arrest Michelle. While Michelle was in jail, she managed to contact her parents, who are conservative. Her parents were determined to handle the situation discreetly. They posted Michelle's bail of $10,000, made possible by their financial stability as successful business owners. Angela started receiving harassing emails after the incidents. Interestingly, the emails she received came from Michelle's personal email address. However, it's unclear if Michelle actually sent them. On July 13th, Angela contacted 911 because she saw a strange man outside her condo. When the police arrived, the man claimed he was responding to a Craigslist ad posted under Angela's name that featured explicit content. Further investigation led the police to discover that the ad was created from an account linked to Michelle. This raised questions about Michelle's potential involvement and whether she may have provided false information to the police. On the other hand, it's possible that someone was using Michelle's name to mislead the authorities. The next day, on July 14th, Michelle was arrested again, with bail set at $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the emails and creating the Craigslist ads. Her parents believed her because they knew she wouldn't send threats to anyone. Concerned about the potential consequences, Michelle's parents hired a lawyer, thinking that the person behind the threats could continue to get their daughter arrested. While Michelle was in jail for the second time, the threats and emails aimed at Angela stopped again. For 3 months, everything seemed calm for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were trying to figure out who was impersonating their daughter. They gathered their daughter's records, including school and hospital records, to see if they could find any weaknesses in the case against her. This led them to find important evidence. Michelle was in the hospital on the same day the first emails were sent, making it impossible for her to have sent them herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received an update about her situation. They had been trying to track down the source of the emails they were receiving, which had encrypted IP addresses. To do this, Michelle's father downloaded various software programs to help identify the senders. Then, in a surprising turn of events, her parents received a phone call with some unexpected news: Michelle's bail had been posted. The surprising twist was that the person who posted the $1 million bail was Ian, the same person who had been treating Michelle badly. This took place on September 30th, 2016, when Ian presented the police with the bail money. Michelle and her family were stunned by this development and couldn't understand why Ian would do such a thing. They had many unanswered questions about his motives. Was he trying to make amends for his past behavior, or was there another reason behind his actions? After Michelle's release on bail, she and her family sought answers. Ian then revealed shocking information, claiming Angela had framed Michelle for sending threatening emails. Angela allegedly used fake email accounts in Michelle's name to send the emails to herself. Angela also posted ads on Craigslist, making it seem like Michelle was responsible. The details in the ads could only have been known by Ian and Angela. Further investigation revealed that Angela's bruises found on June 24, 2016, were self-inflicted. Ian discovered CCTV footage that supported this claim. Ian also uncovered Angela's history of deception. She had been lying since the day they met, and one notable example was her fake pregnancy. Ian found evidence that Angela had bought a fake sonogram of twins on Etsy for $7.50 and a positive pregnancy test kit to support her fabricated story. Angela's motivation to ruin Michelle's life stems from her meeting with Ian in 2015. Ian frequently discussed Michelle and an incident involving a condo. This sparked Angela's curiosity, prompting her to investigate Michelle's past. She discovered that Michelle came from a wealthy background, which led Angela to view her as an opportunity for personal gain. Ian, who was married to Michelle at the time, sought revenge due to a past dispute over the condo's mortgage. The incident had left him feeling bitter, and he was furious about being forced to pay the mortgage following Michelle's countersuit. Together, Angela and Ian devised a plan to bring Michelle down. Ian shared Michelle's email address with Angela, and they began plotting to frame her and have her arrested. In an effort to conceal their scheme, Angela and Ian created separate email addresses to communicate with each other. They also opened 6 fake email accounts in Michelle's name using virtual private networks, VPNs. This is the reason Michelle noticed Google alerts about email addresses in her name that she had not created. Unbeknownst to Michelle, Angela was behind these suspicious activities. When Michelle got a restraining order against, she still felt it wasn't enough, because she wanted Michelle gone forever. Angela devised a plan to escalate the situation further. She created a fake Craigslist profile in Michelle's name, posting an ad that invited men to engage in a sex act at Michelle's home. However, the flaws in the plan led to Ian, Angela's husband, confessing the truth. Once the truth came to light, the police secured a search warrant for Angela's devices. To their amazement, when they checked Angela's belongings, they discovered that everything Ian said was true. A total of 21 threatening emails were discovered, with most being sent from Angela and Ian's residence. Further investigation of the emails revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was ultimately discovered that Angela had visited her father in Arizona during the same period the emails were sent. After discovering these shocking evidence, investigators decided to look into Angela's past. They soon found that she had committed similar crimes before. In 2013, Angela had faked her identity in a serious illness while dating Jason Rayburn, a California state trooper. Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had cervical cancer. However, her story didn't add up, and Jason became suspicious. He dug deeper and made a disturbing discovery. Angela had lied about having cancer and being a lawyer. This ended her relationship with Jason. The deception wasn't made public until 2019, nearly 3 years later. On January 6, 2019, Angela was detained. She pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including perjury and false imprisonment. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The Orange County District Attorney's Office quickly cleared Michelle's name of the wrongful charges. 3 days later, Michelle's assault and threatening charges were officially dropped. This marked the end of a long and painful ordeal for Michelle. Although the ordeal has ended, Michelle still bears the scars of her wrongful conviction, including the time she spent in jail. She had to give up her MBA classes and lost her job after being wrongfully arrested. After the charges were cleared, Michelle's life began to improve. She earned her MBA and got a good job in marketing at a cosmetics company. She then moved to New York to live with her sister, and her life was better than ever. Ian, on the other hand, separated from Angela and sold their condo for $500,000. However, in 2021, Ian's life took a turn for the worse. He was arrested and charged with planning, carrying out the plot to frame Michelle. As a result, he received a 5-year prison sentence and was convicted of perjury. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with JB. As the two girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, JB and Tracy set off from Dothan in JB's 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the two young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., JB and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, JB and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost in Ozark and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and JB approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, JB and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found JB's car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found JB's driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor JB were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of two girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the two girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of J.B. and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of J.B. and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on J.B.'s clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21st, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18th, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and J.B., emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and J.B. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4 hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and JB. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the JB and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. As JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives, the case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the 2 innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary "Butch" Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body in clothing to Virginia-based Parrot Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Lynette Vonda Pontius. Lynette Pontius was born in Battle Creek, Michigan, USA. She was the youngest child in her family, with 2 brothers who were 2 and 3 years older than her. Lynette is very active, sociable and cheerful, so she is always popular in every group of friends. She very also attractive and caught the attention of the opposite sex. She never lacked boyfriends and led a somewhat carefree lifestyle. As a result, Lynette became pregnant and had to leave school in the 9th grade. When Lynette turned 16, she gave birth to her first child. She lived with the child's father for a while, but they eventually broke up. He showed no interest in Lynette or the baby. He disappeared and ignored all to contact him. Lynette's situation was difficult. She struggled to find a suitable job so that she could conveniently take care of her newborn child, and no one wanted to hire Lynette, a teenage mother. Eventually, Lynette found work at a fast food restaurant. To make ends meet, she continued to build relationships. She was interested in several guys in her social circle until she met Martin, a customer at the restaurant, who was 2 years older than her. Martin was from the same city as Lynette's. After high school, he took a part-time job at a private company owned by a married couple who made fences. He wasn't interested in pursuing higher education, so he spent his free time with friends. In 1999, Martin and Lynette started dating after being introduced by a mutual friend. Despite being somewhat bold, Martin was overall a likable person and always keeps a positive attitude. Lynette's relatives believe that he will be able to guide her in the right direction. However, there were rumors that Martin struggled with an addiction to mild substances. Martin and Lynette dated for less than a year, but during that time, he became part of Lynette's family. Her parents welcomed him with open arms, and he came and went from their home freely. However, love that blooms quickly also fades easily. Later, Martin admitted that Lynette was manipulative and accepted no disagreement from others. They had regular conflicts, which led to their breakup. It seemed like nothing special had happened, just two young people who didn't get along. But a few weeks after the breakup, everything changed when Lynette called Martin and told him she was pregnant. Initially, Martin doubted that the child was his, but Lynette insisted it was. A greater surprise came when Lynette was arrested for identity theft, cashing other people's checks, and several other minor scams. Her explanation was that she had committed these crimes out of desperation, as she had no other means of supporting her children. Despite her, Lynette faced the possibility of prison. To protect their first child from ending up in an orphanage, Martin chose to become the boy's legal guardian. He felt responsible for this child and wanted to provide as much support as possible. Martin was a thoughtful father who put his children's needs first. After Lynette's release from prison in 2005, he and Lynette came to a mutual agreement. Martin allowed the children to maintain contact with their mother, and during her imprisonment, he frequently took them to visit her for several hours. Martin made sure the kids had regular, extended visits with Lynette during her imprisonment. Martin has proven himself to be a thoughtful father. He took the children hiking and spent all his free time with them. Even after Lynette's release, life continued smoothly for the family. Martin and Lynette, who were once a couple, agreed on custody arrangements that allowed Lynette to have regular visits with their child. Lynette took custody of their older child. Meanwhile, she started dating a new man and soon became pregnant with her third child. She then officially published her relationship with the father of her unborn child. During this time, Martin had to leave Battle Creek and move to Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, he began a relationship with a new girl, Elizabeth, who also had a child. Martin and Lynette grew apart, but they remained connected through their daughter. At first, everything in the family seemed fine. However, Lynette became concerned as the distance between her and her daughter grew. Matters became more complicated in February 2007, when Martin Campbell was attacked at his girlfriend Elizabeth's house. During the attack, he was shot once in the leg and once in the shoulder. As Martin attempted to flee, he collapsed from the pain and shock. The attacker then pointed the gun at Martin's head and pulled the trigger twice. The attacker intended to empty the entire magazine into Martin. However, after 2 shots to the head, the weapon jammed. Determined to kill Martin, the criminal furiously began to hit his on the head with the pistol. He then left the bleeding Martin on the floor and calmly walked away. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation and spoke with a witness. Elizabeth provided the first clues about the criminal. Although he wore a mask, she noticed that he appeared much older, as she saw a mustache with gray hairs peeking through. The killer's behavior was clear. He didn't steal anything or attack Elizabeth. His target was Martin. This was evident from the brutality of the attack, which left no chance for Martin's survival. At that time, doctors were trying to save Martin's life. Despite suffering severe head and face injuries, he survived, which was nothing short of a miracle. He was fortunate because the gun jammed. Even a shot to the head could have been fatal. The first bullet hit his shoulder and narrowly missed a major artery. Had it been severed, Martin would have bled to death before the ambulance arrived. Martin's miraculous survival was also crucial for the investigation, as it allowed detectives to get information directly from him. Once his condition stabilized, detectives visited him in the hospital to talk. Martin and Elizabeth were certain that the attempted murder was not a random. This was the second attempt on his life that he had survived. In late February, just days before the shooting, Elizabeth reported an attempted murder while she was returning from the store. As she drove into the garage, a stranger crashed into her car's trunk, blocking her vehicle and the garage door, preventing it from closing. She got out and saw a black SUV, from which a weapon man emerged. The man pointed a gun at Elizabeth's head and asked where Martin was. However, she remained calm and told him that Martin was not home. This was a lie, as she knew Martin was playing with the children in the backyard. She lied to protect their lives. Her tactic worked. The man believed her and left. Before leaving, he mentioned that Martin owed him a large sum of money, and he was there to collect the debt, warning that he would not leave them alone. At that time, Elizabeth contacted the police and provided a detailed description of the man and his car. Additionally, a neighbor witnessed the skirmish, sensed something was wrong, and noted the car's license plate. However, the police discovered that the car was reported stolen and registered in another state, which did not help the investigation. It seemed the search for the criminal had reached a dead end. Nevertheless, a similar car was found a few blocks from the attack site in an apartment complex parking lot. The police attempted to track down the driver of the black SUV but were unsuccessful. The day before the unexpected attack, a masked man broke into Martin and Elizabeth's house and shot Martin at close range. Martin was certain that the killer had been sent by his ex, Lynette Pontius. She was the only person with a motive against he. Her criminal record raised suspicions, as she had previously spent 2 years in prison for financial crimes, including fraud and extortion. However, initially after her release, there were no issues, and Martin did not restrict her communication with their child. Lynette quickly begins to control things and she wants more. She sought to control the process of raising her children and would behave brutal when she was dissatisfied with something. This led to constant conflicts. As a result, Martin decided to reduce the time his daughter spent with her biological mother, Lynette, which further angered she. Finally, she went to court to dispute Martin's custody. However, she faced an obstacle due to her previous convictions, which worked against her, giving Martin a strong chance of winning. This could have been the last straw, making her hate him more and more. Investigators had several questions, particularly about why Lynette had resorted to such actions. Until now, no one had ever observed any aggressive behavior in Lynette. All her relatives and friends knew her as a kind and cheerful person. Additionally, it was clear that the attacker was an older man on both occasions, suggesting that Lynette might truly be innocent. To find answers, the detectives decided to directly contact the main suspect in organizing the assassination attempt. They were surprised to discover that Lynette had left her hometown the day after the shooting at the house Martin. Elizabeth found it suspicious to exclude Lynette from the suspect list. However, finding and detaining Lynette was not easy. It was discovered that she was trying to flee the country, and a nationwide search was launched to capture her. During this time, detectives received another lead. It was revealed that Martin may owe large sums of money from criminal organizations. Some of Martin's friends mentioned that he had been in debt for a long time. Martin used to consume soft substances and smoke. He admitted this to the police but insisted that those days were behind him. Martin claimed that he only used these substances during his meet with Lynette and had quit his bad habits long ago. Before Lynette was caught, a prisoner from the local jail informed the police that Lynette had approached him some time before the attack, offering money to carry out an attack Martin. Lynette was searching for a mercenary to kill Martin. She devised a cunning plan. Accordingly, the killer must win Martin's trust, and after a while, get him drunk or full of mild narcotics to ensure unconsciousness. Afterward, the hired killer would eliminate Martin. Lynette believed it would be best to make it look like an accident. Overall, she didn't care about the method, as long as Martin dies, so that she can gain custody of their daughter. Later, the police gathered evidence from various individuals who reported receiving similar requests and provocations from Lynette. Many people claimed that she had tried to hire them as mercenaries, but none of them were actual shooters, and they all declined the offer. Fortunately, the police quickly identified the killer, who was likely the person who agreed to help Lynette. This suspect was a 59-year-old man named Joseph Lover, who was romantically involved with Lynette. He had a history of involvement in numerous serious crimes. Joseph fit the description of the attacker and was capable of carrying out such a bold attack in broad daylight. The brutal massacre aligned with the style of Joseph, a man who had spent most of his life in prison. However, when the police attempted to locate him, they discovered that he had left the city around the same time Lynette disappeared. It is likely that they fled together. Lynette and Joseph managed to stay hidden until February 13, 2007, when they were discovered near the Mexico-US border. They had been planning to escape to another country to avoid facing justice. However, Lynette realized she needed to retrieve some important documents she had left behind in Mexico and had to return for them. Unfortunately for them, the police were already there waiting to capture them. 5 days later, they were taken into custody, which was a great relief for Martin, who was worried about another attack. Although he was pleased with the arrest, the investigation struggled to communicate with the criminals. Surprisingly, Joseph was very cooperative with the detectives. He admitted he was driving a stolen car and having a pistol, hoping for a reduced sentence. However, he consistently denied being involved in the attack and attempted murder of Martin. Lynette partially backed up his claims, stating she had hired a mercenary to confront Martin. Her intention, she said, was not to kill him but to scare him into relinquishing custody of their daughter. Being separated from her daughter made Lynette extremely miserable. She claimed that Martin did not allow her to see her daughter. Additionally, she alleged that she found evidence of Martin abusing her daughter. Lynette accused Martin of substance abuse and domestic violence. She also shared details about their relationship, stating that Martin had repeatedly beaten her, which led to their breakup. Lynette did not see him as a benefactor, said that he took advantage of her difficult circumstances when their daughter was born. He allegedly forced her to sign documents and formalize guardianship while she was helpless in prison. She believes Martin acted shamelessly in taking advantage of her situation. The interrogations of the two suspects, Lynette and Joseph, happened at the same time, but in different rooms to compare their stories. The investigators, having received information from Lynette, decided to confront Joseph. Initially, Joseph refused to tell the truth. However, once he learned that Lynette the crime was trying to turn him in to the police, Joseph changed his story. He claimed that Lynette had first approached him in 2007 with a request to kill Martin. Lynette didn't care how Martin died, she just wanted him gone forever. The plan was for Martin to disappear without any witnesses, and his body would be disposed of discreetly. But Lynette didn't expect Joseph to act in a dramatic manner. Joseph's story matched with what the police already knew. During the investigation, the police chose to disclose this information to observe Lynette's response. Lynette, however, cleverly refused to give a statement and asked for a lawyer. Prosecutors claimed that Lynette's main motive was her dissatisfaction with the decisions regarding her child's upbringing and restrictions on communicating with him. She tried to challenge custody in court but was unsuccessful. After that, Lynette didn't stop and decided to hire a hitman. Joseph Lover, 51 years old, was also charged with attempted murder. This man admitted his guilt and provided the police with a detailed report. The trial was full of surprises, starting when Joseph unexpectedly changed his earlier testimony during the hearing. He retracted his previous statements and took full responsibility for the incident, claiming that Lynette was not involved and that he was solely responsible for planning and executing the assassination attempt. It seemed like Joseph loved Lynette so much that he wanted to protect her. However, before the next stage of the hearing, Joseph shocked everyone again by reverting to his original story, asserting that Lynette had hired him as a hitman. To obtain these confessions the prosecution suggested a plea deal. In this case, the prosecutor's office re-entered the proceedings, aiming to demonstrate that Lynette had a justified motive. Lynette clearly disliked Martin due to dissatisfaction with custody arrangements. However, the prosecutor's office relied on very limited evidence. In reality, there was nothing concrete to directly implicate Lynette in the crime. There were no phone records or messages, and Joseph, the sole witness, was unreliable, which weakened the prosecution's position. Lynette's lawyer effectively used these weaknesses to persuade the jury of her innocence. On October 3rd of that year, Joseph confirmed to the jury that Lynette was the mastermind behind the plan to kill Martin. He confirmed that she had formulated the whole plan. However, his numerous contradictions and retractions during the testimony made the jury question his credibility. The defense then made a surprising move. According to Lynette, Martin was an abusive father who often physically harmed his daughter. She presented photos showing bruises on the child's arms and back as evidence. In response, Martin's family defended him by disputing these accusations. They suggested the photos only showed minor abrasions that a child might get accidentally, arguing they did not resemble signs of abuse. They even implied that Lynette herself might have caused the bruises. Despite the defenses put forward by Martin's relatives, Lynette successfully raised doubts in the jury's minds, she portraying herself as a victim. This thing aimed to make Martin's murder seem like an act of kindness in protection of the child. In the end, the lawyers portrayed her accomplice, Joseph, as a true hero. They argued that Joseph was protecting Lynette and her daughter. Lynette did not ask for Martin to be killed, she only wanted to scare him. However, Joseph, a seasoned criminal, believed he was rescuing the girl from cruelty and tyranny, which led him to kill Martin. Additionally, the defense argued that Lynette could not have planned the murder herself, because if that had happened, she would likely have faced life in prison. This was inconsistent with the image of a loving, caring mother seeking custody of her child. Now, the jury had to make a decision in this complicated case. On October 5, 2007, after lengthy discussions, the jury announced the verdict in this case. Lynette was found guilty of orchestrating the attack. Her extravagant lifestyle and criminal record worked against her. The jury didn't believe the lawyer who portrayed Martin as an abuser involved in domestic violence against the child. In fact, there was no evidence to support these claims. Lynette's family was shocked by the jury's verdict. Initially, Lynette was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 50 years, but the sentence was later changed. However, the judge considered Lynette to be a socially dangerous person. He sincerely expressed his hope that no parole board would ever decide to release the woman. Lynette remains in the Huron Correctional Facility for women. She has served enough of her sentence to apply for parole and has submitted a petition. Lynette is hopeful about being released soon. But no decision has been made yet. Martin's family hoped she will never be released. Her accomplice, Joseph, received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Chad Amelia. Chad Amelia was born in 1992 in Santa Clara, California, USA. His parents, of Irish descent, married young and then moved to the United States. They were eager to pursue the American dream, a common goal for millions. When they arrived in the United States, they found themselves isolated in a foreign country, with no one nearby to support them. Communication with relatives was only possible by phone. Despite the distance, the couple and their children remained determined and did not return to Ireland. Chad grew up with his younger brother Shane. They got along and supported each other from a young age. Following the example of their parents, difficulties shaped their characters, making them kind and fair. Both boys were always ready to help others in need. Chad, the eldest, was especially hardworking. He played baseball and football in high school, and when a coach noticed his talent, he was given a spot on the school team. This opportunity fueled his passion for sports, and he became a talented football player. After graduating from high school, he attended California State University, Chicago, graduating in 2018. Soon after, he joined Camarilla, an accounting firm. At the same time, he continued his studies in economics to improve his accounting skills. Known for being sociable and kind, Chad easily connects with people. One spring day in 2018, 20-year-old Chad was walking his dog in the park when he unexpectedly met Bryn Spetcher, a smart, friendly, and determined 27-year-old girl. Like Chad, Bryn is from Chicago, Illinois. She moved to Washington when she was older, making some changes to pursue her education and find a good job. Bryn was born with hearing problems and was nearly deaf from a young age, forcing her to wear a hearing aid. This made her feel out of place in the educational environment, leading to various challenges. However, it also fueled her desire to help others, as she tried to maintain a positive attitude. Despite the difficulties of moving to California, Bryn earned a degree in audiology, a significant accomplishment that she had long pursued. Her career was just beginning, and she quickly secured a position as an audiologist at a hospital in Los Angeles. She wanted to help others who, like her, faced hearing challenges. Bryn lived in California for about a year but was not sociable and often took time off from work, so she did not have a wide circle of acquaintances, communicating only with a few friends with whom she could spend weekends. Chad changed her life dramatically. They started talking and quickly realized that they had many common interests. Chad was very fond of his smart and attractive girlfriend. He often talked about her to his friends, and he expressed his happiness. She seemed pleased too, eager to share stories about him with her friends. They seemed like the perfect couple, visiting each other often. On May 27, 2018, Bryn went to her boyfriend's house, bringing along her beloved service dog, a husky guide dog. Her boyfriend, Chad, also had a dog, and the two animals got along well. The following weekend, about a month later, Bryn was planning a business trip to another city, so she wanted to spend some time relaxing with her Chad before the trip. and Chad lived in the Tarzana Oaks area of California. That evening, one of Chad's neighbors, a guy named Vinny, returned home around 2 a.m. He spent about half an hour with Chad and Bryn, who were watching their favorite TV series. Vinny then went to sleep in his room, while another neighbor slept, using earplugs and sleeping pills. That night, Bryn and Chad decided to smoke marijuana. In California, marijuana use is legal, having been legalized in 1996. Chad took a few breaths and quickly relaxed. Bryn at first, she didn't feel anything, so she tried again. This time, she felt terrible. Her mind went blank, her vision blurred, and she had trouble breathing. She told her boyfriend, who went into the kitchen to get her some water. She felt so bad that she feared for her life and asked Chad to stay with her. Chad, who had used before, didn't have the same problems and was calm enough to support her. Bryn admits that she thought she was going to die. She began hallucinating about dying in pain and felt like she wouldn't survive the night. She was angry at her boyfriend because he seemed fine and suspected that he was setting her up. In her hallucinations, he became the bad guy who orchestrated her death through drug use. She also heard voices in her head urging her to kill him, and Bryn realized that the only way she could survive was to get rid of her boyfriend. Suddenly, she stood up and went into the kitchen, where she picked up a large knife. Bryn returned to the living room, where Chad was still lying on the couch. She stabbed him multiple times in the chest. At that moment, she heard voices urging her to continue stabbing. She couldn't resist them because she felt out of control. Bryn experienced a fierce cruelty and aggression she had never felt before. The hallucinations continued, and with each stab, she felt relief. Meanwhile, the neighbors were in other rooms on the second floor. One was fast asleep and didn't hear anything. The second neighbor, Vinny, heard some rustling from downstairs, but there was no loud noise or screaming, so he didn't think much of it. Vinny assumed the couple was watching TV. After a while, he heard Chad's voice asking Bryn to leave him alone and call for help. The voice got louder and more frightening, which scared Vinny. To find out what was going on, he started going down from the first floor. When he walked in, the first thing he noticed was the frightened dogs. When he entered the room, he saw the furniture scattered everywhere. In the living room, Bryn had a knife in her hand, covered in blood. Chad lay there, wheezing, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Vinny. Chad's hand was slashed by her, defenseless, but Bryn, in her frenzy, stabbed him with a kitchen knife. A large gash across his chest that Bryn continued to attack with a look of fury on her face. Vinny yelled at her to stop, but instead, Bryn turned to look at him with a blank expression. She was still holding the knife. Feeling the danger, Vinny quickly went upstairs and knocked on the second neighbor's door to warn him. However, the neighbor was fast asleep and did not respond. So Vinny grabbed his cell phone and ran downstairs. Fearing for his life, he ran out onto the street and quickly called 911. Once outside, Vinny used his phone to call emergency services. His screams attracted the attention of the neighbors, who ran out to see what was going on, making Vinny feel safer. He started banging on the windows and shouting for the girl to stop. The neighbors, seeing the situation inside the house, also started shouting. Everyone was scared and shocked. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, Bryn continued to attack Chad, not paying attention to the commotion outside. Within minutes, the police met Vinny, who was sobbing about the events that were happening. He could only point to the apartment where the violent attack was taking place. The police rushed into the house to intervene. In the living room, they found Bryn repeatedly stabbing a young man in the chest. The room was covered in blood, and although the young man showed no signs of life, Bryn did not stop. The police considered using force to end the attack. However, when ordered to drop the knife, Bryn began stabbing herself in the neck. The police quickly used a stun gun, but it was ineffective. Bryn continued to harm herself, so the police used a baton to disarm her. It took 9 blows to knock the knife out of her hand, even breaking her arm in several places, but she seemed completely unaware of the injuries. Only then did Bryn drop the knife. In addition to stabbing Chad, she also stabbed her dog several times. When other rescue services arrived, everyone was shocked by the horrific scene, which looked like a bloodbath. Doctors tried to resuscitate Vinny, but he was in shock and could not remember or explain what had happened in the house. The experience had a profound effect on him and he needed a long recovery period with the help of psychologists. The dog was treated at a veterinary clinic and eventually recovered from his injuries. Unfortunately, by the time the police arrived, Chad was dead. There was a lot of blood from the stab wound and witnesses to the incident were present. These witnesses were neighbors who had come out of the house when they heard screams. They described what they saw to the police, but could not understand how such a brutal attack could have happened or what had provoked it. Chad had 108 stab wounds, most of them concentrated around the heart and neck. Some of the wounds were superficial and not life-threatening, while others penetrated vital organs. It is difficult to determine which specific wound caused Chad's death. He also had multiple self-defense wounds. Bryn after self-inflicted wounds to her neck. She was rushed to the hospital, where she was placed on a ventilator and intubated. When police tried to communicate with her, they used only a piece of paper and a pen, as she was unable to fully respond because of the life support equipment. Once she was stabilized in the hospital, she was able to communicate fully. Various tests showed traces of mild substances in her blood. Doctors noted that the levels were very low and did not pose a threat to her life or mental health. It is unusual for such a small amount to cause such an extreme reaction. However, doctors did not rule out the possibility that her blood levels had dropped. When Bryn spoke to the police, she claimed that she did not remember anything that had happened. As a result, she did not know where Chad was or what had happened to him. She believed that her injuries may have been caused by an assault with the intent to rape her. In addition to the neck injury, she also suffered a broken neck and a bludgeoned arm, which was how the police safely disarmed her of the knife. However, she did not remember the event either. Bryn could not believe the police account of how she attacked and stabbed her boyfriend. Despite this, she did not seem to feel remorse for her actions toward Chad. Bryn refused to comment further and immediately requested a lawyer, as she considered herself innocent and blamed the incident on the effects of drugs. The last thing she remembered was being discharged from the hospital after 4 days, on May 31st, when she was immediately arrested for Chad's murder. Eventually, she was able to share a more detailed account of the events of that tragic night. Bryn recounted her story. She had gone to visit her boyfriend with a dog and they watched TV together. Around 10:30 p.m., when Chad stepped outside to smoke, she joined him, saying she wanted to try it too. She then began to feel unwell, hallucinating and hearing voices in her head. Bryn had difficulty breathing, felt disoriented and nauseous. She then had a hallucination blaming Chad for her condition. The hallucination urged her to kill Chad, claiming it was the only way to stop her bad feelings. Although she initially resisted, the hallucinations grew stronger. Feeling like she was going to die, Bryn attacked Chad with a knife but insisted that she had no control at the time, claiming she was innocent. When the police arrived, the hallucinations told her to harm herself. She complied with these voices. Bryn insisted that she could not resist because the voices in her head had complete control over her. She could not even drop the knife when the police asked her to, until they broke her arm. Bryn believed that she was suffering from drug-induced psychosis at the time. She was eventually charged with first-degree murder, but she pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Preliminary hearings took place and her bail was set at $500,000, which she paid, allowing her to await trial at home. During this time, the police continued to investigate and Bryn's attorney repeatedly requested adjournments. And Chad's murder trial was set for October 23, 2023, but a new district attorney took office a month earlier, causing further delays. The trial finally began on November 9, 2023. The new prosecutor reduced her charges to manslaughter, which shocked the victim's family. They could not understand how someone could accidentally stab the victim more than 100 times. Remarkably, all of this took so long that Chad's mother did not live to see the trial and never saw justice. She passed away in 2020. The court psychiatrist concluded that Bryn suffered from a psychotic disorder caused by smoking. This decision was supported by other experts, and according to the prosecution, they did not have enough evidence to refute this conclusion. During the trial, Chad's family insisted that it was a deliberate massacre and demanded punishment. The defense argued that Bryn's behavior showed signs of psychosis. She was not aware of her actions, first stabbing her boyfriend and then hitting him multiple times. A police officer using a stun gun was unable to stop her, and they were only able to take the knife away after breaking her arm with 9 blows from her baton. This behavior showed that she was psychotic. However, according to Bryn, she understood what was happening. She remembered everything and claimed that she saw the murder as the only way to survive. She was aware of her actions and made her own decisions, despite experiencing hallucinations. Her arguments were strongly opposed by her attorneys. As a result, the defense continued to delay the trial, which lasted for 5 years. The main issues in dispute were whether there was intent to kill Chad and whether Bryn used the drug voluntarily. Under California law, a person can be held responsible for such crimes while under the influence of drugs or alcohol if it can be proven that the use was voluntary. If the drug was coerced, the killing is considered unintentional. This must be proven. The prosecution pointed to numerous letters from the girl, in which Bryn repeatedly told friends that she had been drinking. She also mentioned smoking occasionally, suggesting that this was not her first time using. The prosecution argued that on the day Chad was killed, she also used the drug voluntarily, as she had done before. Many colleagues defended Bryn, describing her as a very responsible person. She had no criminal record and no one could testify that she was capable of causing such a psychotic episode. However, this claim seems dubious, given her medical history, which should have made her aware of the potential consequences. She defended herself by saying that she was unsure what drugs her boyfriend had smoked and given her that night and believed he had given them to her intentionally. No other drugs were found in his home. Bryn's parents defended her, claiming that she had no romantic relationship with Chad and that she was acting in self-defense against harassment. They attempted to portray her as a heroine. However, friends on both sides disagreed, saying that Chad and Bryn had been together for nearly 2 months, had an intimate relationship, and that everyone knew about it. Chad's relatives denied any allegations of violence against him. They described him as respectful of women and noted that although he had a smoking habit, which his parents had advised him to quit, it was legal and had never caused any problems. They insisted he was not aggressive, so they did not believe he would attack his girlfriend. Throughout the trial, Bryn showed no remorse for what had happened. The only time she cried was when the brutal details of her arrest were described. She could recall the intense pain of being beaten with a baton. The case was complex, controversial, and attracted considerable public attention. Many were puzzled as to how a seemingly kind-hearted girl, dedicated to helping others, could commit a brutal murder. The jury then deliberated on the verdict. The jury then found Bryn Spejcher, 32, guilty of manslaughter. Bryn showed emotion for the second time during the trial. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed. At that point, she was focused only on her sentence. She did not care that she had caused serious harm to her loved one. Bryn simply did not want to take responsibility for her actions. Chad's father spoke to reporters, expressing his frustration with the justice system's decision, which he considered unfair. He also pointed to inconsistencies in Bryn's testimony. She contradicted herself. For example, she initially described her boyfriend as a nice young man who was easy to talk to. However, when the subject of smoking was brought up, Bryn admitted that she had always been afraid of him and then began to deny that they had a relationship. Chad's father said that Bryn did not want to take responsibility for her terrible actions and tried to blame Chad for the bloody massacre to reduce her sentence. The father could not believe that the court would seriously consider that a person could accidentally inflict more than 100 wounds on another person. His son's death was not simple or painless. Chad had suffered a lot, and now the killer was trying to blame him with lies. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Bryn smoked of her own free will, and Chad had never forced her to take drugs when she did not like them. However, psychiatric experts confirmed that Bryn's psychosis was caused by the drug. This was one of the first cases where a voluntary user was justified in using drugs. And while awaiting the verdict, the girl was released on bail. On January 24, 2024, Bryn Spetscher was sentenced to 2 years of probation in order to complete 100 hours of community service. The judge justified the lenient sentence by stating that Bryn was not in control of his actions during a psychotic episode, making a reduced sentence appropriate. The attorney applauded the court's decision, calling it the right thing to do. However, Chad's father was unhappy with the ruling, arguing that the judge had set a dangerous precedent. He said the decision implied that marijuana users in California were being given a license to kill. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Mikhail Bush. Mikhail Bush was born on February 13, 1997, in Alberta, Canada. She is the eldest of 2 daughters. She attended a local high school, where she met Cody McConnell. They began their relationship in the summer of 2014. Later their relationship blossomed and they decided to start a family together. After graduating, Mikhail worked at a public organization that supported people with disabilities by finding nurses and meeting their needs. There, she realized her passion for helping people. At work, she learned the basics of healthcare and decided to pursue a career in nursing. To achieve this, she needed formal training, so Mikhail enrolled at Northwest College in Edmonton. She devoted all her free time to studying, determined to become a skilled professional. Working in the medical field in Canada is respected and well paid. This meant that pursuing a major that she loved would allow her to support their small family. Her relationship with Cody grew stronger, and he supported her in her studies. At that time, they lived together. In 2019, shortly after graduating, she found out she was pregnant. This was an important and anticipated event for the young couple, and they were very excited. Everything went as well as could be. Their dream of expanding their family became a reality. Soon after, the young couple got married and began preparing for their future child. On April 17, 2020, they welcomed a son named Noah McConnell after his birth. Mikhail and Cody devoted themselves to taking care of their child and supported each other wholeheartedly. At this time, Mikhail and Cody lived happily together. Noah was a very cute child. He rarely cried, and when he did, it usually stopped very quickly. However, a few months later, Cody had difficulty working and was easily tired, so his wife Mikhail advised him to go to the hospital. After the examination, Cody was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Because of this, he lost his job. Cody was on sick leave for a long time, but during this time, they always supported and understood each other. The couple tried their best to maintain their happiness. After a while, Cody was able to return to his job. He worked in the installation of turboprop engines, a job that required frequent business trips to different cities. This sudden change in lifestyle naturally affected the family. At that time, Mikhail was a housewife, taking care of her children without a regular job. In order to avoid being apart for a long time, they decided to buy a mobile home. Life on the road was difficult, but the family stayed together. By August 2020, their life had undergone significant positive changes. Cody secured a higher-paying job, allowing him to spend more time at home. The couple traveled frequently to different locations, but they had the opportunity to rent an apartment in Hinton, Alberta. This small town is 3 hours west of Edmonton, near Jasper National Park. The move, which meant they no longer had to live on the road, marked a long-awaited change in their family life. In early September, the couple and their child moved into their new home. The apartment was much more spacious than their previous home and certainly larger than the small trailer they had been living in. Cody could finally settle down with his family and focus on building a life together. However, the young couple had no idea that their happiness would soon turn into a nightmare so severe that a change in the law would be necessary. On September 16, 2021, in Canada, the day started like any other morning for the family. Cody took his child for a walk and they spent money on entertainment, something they could not afford before. Now that life had improved, Cody was able to spend more time with his 16-month-old son. Cody then went to work as usual, leaving his wife at home. His shift ended around 5 or 6 p.m., and he returned home, eager to spend more time with his son. However, when he got home, the apartment was quiet. The child did not respond to his name or make any noises as usual. The silence was alarming. After searching all the rooms, Cody realized that his family was actually not home, which was unusual. Cody thought that his wife might have gone to the store with the baby for a while. But upon closer inspection, he realized that was unlikely, as the stroller was still in the apartment, neatly folded and untouched. Without the stroller, they would not have gone for a walk, and his wife's car was still parked outside, which made him even more worried. Cody ran around the apartment screaming, but the silence made him suspicious. In the kitchen, he discovered another worrying sign. His wife had started cooking dinner but had stopped abruptly. The groceries were still on the table, some cut and some still intact. It seemed like something had interrupted her, which made Cody extremely worried. He tried calling his wife but couldn't get through. With no answer and growing increasingly worried, he decided to take action. Although he didn't want to believe that anything bad had happened, he hoped they had just gone to a nearby park or plaza and lost track of time. Desperate to find her, he set off immediately. With increasing anxiety, he searched alleys and parks but found no trace of his wife and son. After going through the area around the apartment complex several times, he contacted friends and family, hoping that she was with someone he knew. However, no one heard or saw her all day. Around 7 p.m., in desperation, Cody called the police to report that his wife and son were missing. Cody called a friend named Jareth, who came to their home to help. Together, they began searching the neighborhood, still hoping to find Mikhail and his son without police intervention. They checked the apartment again and walked around the entire apartment complex several times. Unable to calm down, they began going from apartment to apartment, knocking on doors and asking neighbors if they had seen or heard anything. When the police arrived, Cody and Jarrett were still searching. The police had to calm them down. Since Cody and Jareth were not professionals, their search could disrupt or destroy important evidence. Therefore, the police instructed them to stop their search efforts. The police thoroughly searched the apartment, the surrounding residential area, and nearby squares and parks, but like Cody, they were unable to find anything. Cody's next-door neighbor, Robert, told the police that he had witnessed an unknown man running out of Cody's apartment that day. Although he could not provide further details, the neighbor's account raised suspicions. Therefore, the police decided to consult with the apartment manager to gain access to surveillance camera footage. They wanted to determine when and why Mikhail and the child disappeared, whether she had run away or been kidnapped. There was speculation that a lover might have been involved, but Cody adamantly denied this. He said he had a happy family. Initially, police found no signs of forced entry, struggle, or blood in the family's apartment. Police also considered whether there had been a kidnapper. However, how could the perpetrator have entered without any signs of forced entry? It was probably someone Mikhail knew and trusted enough to open the door for. When police reviewed the surveillance footage, they found no evidence to support the neighbor's claim that a stranger had entered Mikhail's apartment. Instead of catching the mysterious stranger, the footage showed the neighbor taking a bag out of her apartment and throwing it in the apartment complex's trash bin. Mikhail and her son were not seen in the surveillance footage, raising suspicions about the neighbor's involvement in the disappearance. Meanwhile, Cody and Jarrett anxiously waited for news near home, eventually staying at another neighbor's apartment. Cody was expecting his wife and child to return. At 2 a.m., at the apartment where Cody was staying, the police knocked on the door. However, they did not have good news for Cody. Instead, they asked him to move to a hotel while the investigation was ongoing. The police stated that waiting was useless. They needed to take a closer look at the apartment and the area around the house. In fact, the police did not come by accident. They did not want to tell Cody that his child had been found dead, because they had to confirm the prime suspect. The next morning, Cody, who had not slept all night, went to the police station for questioning after leaving his home. The police asked him the usual questions to piece together the events of the previous day. However, many of the questions left him confused, leading him to suspect that something was wrong. The police then revealed that Noah's body was found in a trash can inside the residence. Noah had been strangled, with a man's sock in her mouth and a plastic bag over her head. Some of Mikhail's belongings were found, but her body was not found. Chance for his wife and children to return home safely was gone. Receiving news from the police, he was horrified and in pain when his child died tragically. During the night, Cody was asked to leave the apartment because the police did not want to draw attention to the arrest of the neighbor who lived next door. The police, skeptical of the neighbor Robert's story, visited him again and asked to check his apartment, where the police found a body in the bathroom. She was small and lying face down, but the worst part was that her entire body had been cut into pieces. Experts found evidence of sexual violence committed after her death. The Mikhails had only moved into the complex a few weeks ago. They had barely had time to see some of the neighbors. With Robert, they had hardly ever seen him. Cody thought they had a quiet, unassuming neighbor who didn't want to draw attention to himself. Robert kept his distance from everyone. Now, it was clear that the most dangerous guy was living among them, but no one knew about it. What the neighbors didn't know was that Robert Maid had been arrested on suspicion of murder and child abuse. During a background check, police discovered that Robert had a criminal record with 24 convictions, including 2 for sexual violence. He was first charged with a felony for assaulting a girl in the early 2000s. It is unclear whether he ever served any prison time for this crime. Then, in 2012, Robert was charged with a brutal sex crime. He posed as a nanny to gain the trust of a couple and, when he picked up their child, raped the child instead of going for a walk in the park. He is suspected of being involved in other similar incidents. Robert was arrested and convicted for this crime, but only served 3 years. While in prison, he attended a special rehabilitation program for sex offenders, received psychological support, and attended church regularly. Robert was released from prison after psychiatrists deemed him ready to re-enter society. However, this assessment proved to be incorrect. Just a few years after his release, he expressed a desire to harm innocent people, The police reviewed his test results while in prison and found that he had not been rehabilitated. Instead, he preferred to attack children and young women for the thrill of it. Since there was no legal basis to detain him any longer, Edmonton police could only warn that Robert was dangerous and likely to harm someone again. This man was clearly a threat to women, and especially young children. In order to protect society from potential rapists, many restrictions were placed on him. Specifically, he was prohibited from being near children and women, and could not live near schools or parks. Robert was also subject to a curfew and could only leave Edmonton with official permission from his supervising police officer. After his release from prison, he strictly followed these regulations for many years. He was monitored, so he did not appear in crime reports. However, over time it became clear that he had been waiting for an opportunity to commit a crime. Under Canadian law, a convicted sex offender can be removed from the Dangerous Offender Register if they have not been involved in any similar incidents for a year. In June 2020, this happened to one such offender. Despite his extensive criminal history, a court decision removed the rapist from police supervision. This allowed him, to move to a new residential area, a move that had previously been restricted. Now, he is unsupervised and unmonitored. The public was outraged by the tragic situation. By removing the restrictions on the offender, the police endangered the lives of women and children in the area. Cody said people deserved to know that they were living near a dangerous rapist, giving them the opportunity to relocate if necessary. The investigation found that 2 victims were killed before police were notified. It was discovered that Robert and the victims were just neighbors in a senior housing complex. They did not know or communicate with each other. During questioning, Robert openly confessed to these motives. As before, he informed the police that he struggled with the urge to kill and physically abuse at the same time. He admitted that he was a sick person who needed to be prayed for and confessed that he enjoyed the process. Robert believed that he needed to be isolated from society, otherwise, he feared that he would repeat his actions. Cody, who had just lost his entire family, was visited by his brothers, friends, co-workers, neighbors, and concerned citizens who came to pay their respects. It was believed that if there had not been a system error, the police would have continued to monitor this dangerous criminal and McHale would still be alive. Cody attended all the hearings, wearing his wife's wedding ring around his neck and carrying a blue blanket. Deeply saddened, he was determined to defend his rights. Even through tears, he insisted that ordinary citizens should be informed about potentially dangerous criminals living nearby. Until recently, ordinary Canadians did not have access to databases of dangerous criminals. Wanting to protect other families, Cody McConnell launched a campaign to change the existing laws. The effort, dubbed Noah's Law in honor of his young son. Robert pleaded guilty to all charges and recounted the events of that day in court. He said that after Cody left for work, Cody's wife and son went for a walk in a nearby park. When they returned home, they encountered the apartment manager. The manager informed McHale that Cody had made a mess in the hallway the day before and asked him to clean it up. Sure enough, Cody had made a mess the day before, leaving a mark. McHale apologized for the mess and promised to clean it up, she planning to do so later. At that moment, Robert overheard the conversation and saw it as the perfect opportunity to act. McHale entered the apartment with the child, fed Noah, and planned to put him to bed. While the child was playing, McHale began cooking dinner and called her friend. During the phone conversation, there was a knock on the door. The friend later testified that she had heard the knock, although it was faint due to the distance. Robert offered to help clean up since she was busy watching the child. The woman thanked him for his help and agreed. Her conversation with her friend then ended. After cleaning up, Robert found an excuse to enter McHale's apartment. When he gained access to her home, suddenly, Robert attacked her, strangling her with his hands for about 10 minutes. Even then, Mikhail still showed signs of life, so Robert took an electrical cord from an appliance and wrapped it around her neck until she stopped breathing. He raped her, then quietly dragged her to his apartment through the hallway, placing her in the bathroom. Robert then took a knife and inflicted wounds on her body, even removing some of her organs. The police could not find these organs during the investigation, and they were not found in the trash cans, like Noah. Meanwhile, the child was still alive and in the apartment. However, Robert considered the child a threat, so he decided to get rid of the child. He took the child to his apartment and tried to gag the child with a sock. He then suffocated the child by placing a plastic bag over his head. He then placed the body in a trash bag and threw it in a dumpster. During the trial, Robert's behavior was inconsistent. He insists that he is not a bad person and blames mental health issues. However, he also admits that he needs to be separated from society. The idea is that criminals should never be removed from the database if they pose an increased threat. There should be increased police surveillance without any time limits. It is also suggested that residents in nearby areas should be notified if there is a potentially dangerous person living near them. Cody stated that he would never move his family into the same apartment complex as someone like Robert. Currently, the dissemination of requests and proposals to protect the rights of all residents in the country continues. This theme resonates and continues to grow. During the trial, Robert Keith Major, 55, was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years.